All right, welcome everybody to today's scheduled Commission Agenda Meeting. Before I take the roll, I need to actually hand the mic over to Commissioner Partridge, and I will hand the floor over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have some very good news to share, and I think it's been challenging in the state of Minnesota to find bright spots, but we have a very bright spot to share today, and that is that Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan have reappointed Commissioner Sullivan to the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. Thank you. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I can speak for all of us to say that all of us are very happy not only to have you on the commission as a thoughtful, collaborative colleague, but also as a friend. So I am extremely happy to say that. I will mention that Commissioner Sullivan was appointed by Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan in 2020, and in that time he has served as president of the organization of MISO states. He has served as Minnesota's representative to MISO at a time where there were a lot of challenges and continue to be, and so his leadership has been incredibly important in that role. He has also served on NARUC's advisory committee to EPRI and on the MARC board, among a variety of other roles that he has played over the last 6 years. So thank you, Commissioner Sullivan, for continuing to serve. And although I don't have a microphone, unfortunately, that I can carry with me, I will just stand for a moment and read Commissioner Sullivan the oath, and we'll do that quickly and then get started with our agenda meeting for today. I, Joseph Carl Sullivan, do solemnly swear
I, Joseph Carl Sullivan, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission as Commissioner,
of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission as Commissioner,
to the best of my judgment and ability, so help me God.
to the best of my judgment and abilities, so help me God. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioner Partridge. And I'll just say it's been an honor to be serving on this commission with all of you, and with and in this moment I have it's not an exaggeration, I have loved every minute of it. I really have, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody over the next 6 years. We have big challenges, but I know that we will do well together, and we'll tackle them together. So thank you. All right. With that, we can now officially start the meeting, and I will first start with attendance. I'm going to start with Commissioner Sieben. Commissioner Sieben.
Here.
Commissioner Partridge.
Here.
Commissioner Hom.
Here.
Commissioner Tuma.
I am here.
And I am also here.
Official.
A quorum is present. Today we have 4 items on the agenda. I will first start with our first item is Minnesota Power's petition for approval of remaining lives, and I will hand it over to PUC staff, Ms. Pham.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item number 1 today is docket number E-015/D-25342 in the matter of the Minnesota Power's petition for approval of 2025 remaining life depreciation. The question before the Commission today is, should the Commission approve Minnesota Power's 2025 remaining life depreciation proposal? Staff and parties are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pham. Are there any Commissioner questions? Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. So yeah, I do not have a question on this docket, but I think once again I need to reiterate this. This is used to be a consent agenda item, but I pulled it out, so making sure we are properly reviewing it. So I think I had a good conversation with Ms. Palm, and then I think I'm very satisfied with her work. So I think I can just move the motion.
All right, Commissioner Hom, are there any additional questions? Commissioner Sieben, we're good? All right. Commissioner Hom.
So I move decision option 1, 2, 3, 4.
Motion is clear. All right. Commissioner Partridge? To the vote. Yep.
Yes.
Actually, we can, Commissioner Hom?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuma?
Yes.
I also vote yes. Commissioner Sieben?
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you. And now we can move on to item number 2. If parties would come forward, Dr. Dornfeld will introduce the matter. I do not believe we have time allotted for testimony, so we'll move directly into commissioner questions. But if parties who are planning to speak on this can come forward, and Dr. Dornfeld.
Thank you so much, Chair, Commissioners. Congratulations, Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you.
I'm introducing today an item that is listed under several dockets, so bear with me one moment. Item number 2 before the Commission today is from dockets G008, G002, G011/CI-23-117. The next is G999/CI-21565. The next E999/CI-07-1199. The next E999/DI-22-236. And the final E999/CI-14-643. The question before the Commission today: what are the appropriate data sources and values for the regulatory cost of greenhouse gas emissions for Xcel Energy, CenterPoint Energy, and Minnesota Energy Resource Corporation's upcoming gas integrated resource plans? After briefing papers were filed, a few documents were entered into the record, which have been printed and placed up front and shared with commissioners and e-filed. These items are: 1 clarifying conversation, 1 letter from CenterPoint Energy, and 1 late filed decision option from Commissioner Partridge. Parties are available to respond to questions, and staff is as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dornfeld. I'm going to start first with, if parties could introduce themselves. I'm going to start with my left, Dr. Lieb.
Good morning, Sydney Lieb with the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Good morning, Lee Curry, representing the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, Fresh Energy, and Sierra Club.
Nice to see you again, Ms. Curry. It's been a while.
Good morning, Lauren Steinhauser on behalf of Xcel Energy.
Good morning, Trey Harsh on behalf of CenterPoint Energy.
Nice to see you too, Mr. Harsh. I think this may be your first time back. Well, welcome to being on that side of the table. Yeah.
We could actually torture him.
All right. We can now move to Commissioner questions. Are there questions?
Chair,
Commissioner Sieben.
Sullivan, sorry to interrupt, but there are parties online too that haven't been
thank you.
introduced yet.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you in the lurch there. So if we could just start with Ms. Wendt. If anybody who has their camera on, I'm assuming you are planning to speak.
Good morning, Ann Wendt, representing Minnesota Energy Resource Corporation.
Welcome. All right. Next on Dr. Shaw. Who is next? I'll just let you guys go. So whoever wants to go next. All right. I think that might be it then. Oh, there's.
I think Mr. Pranis was trying to speak, but he wasn't. I couldn't hear him.
Mr. Pranis? Okay, so if you have your camera on online, I'm assuming that you're planning to, you're available for questions. So if you could just introduce yourself, turn your mic off and introduce yourself for the record.
Sure, I'll jump in. Dr. Stephen Rose with EPRI. I'm happy to field questions on our comments.
Hi, Dr. Rose. All right.
Good morning. Joylyn Huffman-Malieve on behalf of Minnesota Energy Resources Corporation.
Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioner. Sachin Shah with the Department of Commerce.
All right. And then if Kevin Pranis is available, if he's online, and if we ask him questions, we'll just have him introduce himself then. So, 2 commissioner questions. Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. Hopefully parties had a chance, given the holiday. I know that I filed this a bit late, but I did put in a decision option. I just wanted to kind of address that very quickly, which is that, this is a table that I'm proposing that would set forth certain sensitivities that utilities would include within their gas resource plan filing. The idea here is that it would be very similar to the electric resource planning process, where utilities put forth certain future scenarios. Those scenarios are based on possible and hopefully likely, but certainly possible future regulatory frameworks that could pose a risk for ratepayers. We look at a variety of sensitivities that informs our decision making. It certainly isn't the only thing that we would look at, but it gives us a better sense of the potential risk associated with future regulation. I built this after looking at, and I apologize for those online, no one can see this, so don't worry, there's just a table that we typically file with our decision around electric resource planning that shows the various scenarios of how different environmental costs should be applied. Given that these are our very first gas resource plans, I attempted to keep this fairly simple, and rather than having a high and a low and creating many different scenarios, I picked what I felt like were scenarios or sensitivities that would give us a directional understanding of the risk associated with various types of regulation. With the gas system, regulation is so different from the electric system. When we think about the regulatory cost of carbon, for the electric side, we're thinking about a regulation that would be imposed on the electric utility. When we talk about the regulatory cost of carbon for natural gas, it is a different animal in terms of regulation, and it assumes some sort of regulation of the end-use customer. So I do want to say that I find it challenging to think of that happening in 2030, if I'm being honest. I don't think that's accurate or likely. I think that the idea that we would have a customer level regulation would be something potentially much further out into the future. However, the resource planning timeline for gas planning is 10 years. And I did see that both the Department of Commerce and the CEOs, perhaps other parties, suggested that we would benefit from modeling a sensitivity where there is a customer level regulation on carbon emissions. And that's my understanding, so I will give you a chance to correct that if that's wrong. So the idea here is that we would have one scenario that just has no regulation to see what the modeling or analysis would show. Then we have a scenario, I would call this the likely scenario, where we have regulation of methane at the production level, which is already a regulation that was proposed in 2021, I believe, and has not yet been implemented. I also think there is a likelihood that the state or federal government may take action to regulate methane emissions on the distribution system at a future date. I think the dollar amount was a little bit unclear in the record, so it'd be helpful to talk through that. And then the item number, or the sensitivity number 3 would be sort of a maximum regulation scenario to see what that would look like. I'm just going to pose that, I think, both for parties, but also for commissioners to kind of understand what I was thinking there. And I also want to just say, this is definitely a starting point. I think there's lots of questions in here. I was swayed by staff's briefing papers and saying that at some point you just have to pick a value so that folks can move forward with modeling and we can get started. And I am looking at Excel, who will have to file the first gas resource plan, and thinking about your timeline. So I do want to get something decided so that you all can move forward with your modeling.
Do you want me to turn to Ms. Steinhauser?
Yeah, I think, sorry I didn't pose the real question here. I guess, huh?
I'm understanding it much better now.
Okay, good. There we go. That's what I was going for, is understanding. So, Ms. Steinhauser, I guess I'd just like you to remark on this proposal. The idea would be basically the new decision option 22, however we might modify it today, would be the guidance you would take for your first resource plan. Of course, you could run any number of other scenarios. This is just sort of a starting point.
Ms. Steinhauser.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Partridge, thank you very much for pulling this together. This is a complicated issue, and the docket is complicated. And so our reaction to this was that it does provide a helpful structure for moving forward. In talking to our team, I think the reaction in terms of like looking forward to our actual IRP filing is we're going to have to work through like how do you model some of these things? How do you look at the different values where there's a range? But we're willing to work through those, and then to the extent we can refine those today, that would be helpful.
Okay. Ms. Steinhauser, the only place I have the range is for sensitivity 3 for the carbon regulation. I provided that range because I, as I said, feel like that is the least certain type of regulation we're considering here. And so it would provide some flexibility since we've not modeled that, and I really have we have no experience in what that would look like in the modeling. So perhaps you can speak to, do you want us to narrow that down or not?
Ms. Steinhauser.
Sullivan and Commissioner Partridge, I would defer to my colleague, Olivia Dawson-Olson. She's our expert on the nitty-gritty details of this, so if she could come up.
Great.
If you could just introduce yourself for the record. I believe that Kevin Pranis has also joined, and if Kevin, if you want to turn your camera on and just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I'm hoping folks can hear me now. Kevin Pranis on behalf of Lyon, Minnesota, and North Dakota.
Yep, we hear you and see you. All right.
Hi, Chair Sullivan, Commissioners. I'm Olivia Dawson-Olson at Xcel Energy. So I echo what Lauren has already said, that I think that this is a great framework for us to apply. When it comes down to a range, I totally get both trains of thought that we don't know what that cost is, and there aren't real regulations that we can look at to better understand that cost like there are on the methane side with the 13. And so I totally understand the need for the range. It does impose a certain complexity in the model where anytime there's a range, if you're doing a high, a low, or a high, medium, low, then there will be more runs. And we, to a certain extent, defer to the commission in what would be most helpful to see. Is it beneficial to you all to see multiple different runs to really understand the potential outcomes? Or is it, given that we're already working in a framework of a few different runs for this regulatory cost sensitivity, is it more helpful to have just the one to look at? I think that as written with this range and understanding what you just said, Commissioner Partridge, that it gives us a little bit of a flexibility. We could look at the difference in doing a low and a high, or maybe just taking a midpoint or something like that. We are still getting our modeling fully up and running, and understanding, how we would add in the different segments across upstream, downstream. And so to a certain extent, anything we do here today is possible. The decision is adding complexity for more data points and then understanding if those are valuable or not. And I think that value part really comes down to the commission. We want to do and provide the information that's helpful to you and other stakeholders to see. So that's our understanding of the trade-off.
Yeah,
Commissioner Tuma.
Having looked at a lot of these over the years, and knowing where this one now sits in how your paradigm works, it may be beneficial to say, give us a low range of 5 and a high range of 75. I think that's enough for me in this situation. Sometimes when we get more precisely on PPAs and things like that for IRPs, it's helpful to look at a low, high, medium, or low, medium, high. Get those kind of fine-tuned. But like you said, this is kind of in the unknown territory, and I think for me, I would just benefit from having a high-low, and I could then gets me an analysis. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're saying. It would be beneficial for us to just tell us, give us a high and a low, and that's all we really want to see at this stage. Now we can modify that as we go and get more precise in the future, but that's how I would be comfortable. So I want to make sure that's kind of what you're saying is, tell us what range means. Do you just mean a high-low? And that would be beneficial.
So, Commissioner Tuma, when I look at these three options here, I think of this as basically business as usual,
right,
and then a medium and a high. So for me, it feels like that's basically what you're saying, is that, but.
And I like the way Commissioner Partridge talked about it as we start getting down to the, at the upper left, that's business as usual. The lower left is, we're getting into a little bit more of the unknown, but a reality that there could be regulation in the future. And so I need to be taking that into account when I look at a particular resource or plan that they have. And so what would that look like? And so as I get a little further out into that, unknown kind of, I don't need a lot of analysis, but this is a good analysis, having a range in there. What does that mean? And I think that's important for us to lay that out. And I would find it meaningful just to have the high-low at this stage, but not having to try to get down to some sort of more precise analysis. Katie's got her hand up there.
Oh, Commissioner Sieben.
Thanks, Chair Sullivan. Can we hear from the parties what they think about the rest of Commissioner Partridge's proposal before we start debating something else that Commissioner Tuma just suggested? Because I think, from my view, Commissioner Partridge is on to something, and it might just be helpful to hear what the department thinks and the other gas utilities who would be doing this, and the CEOs, obviously, and other parties.
So I will start with the department, and then we can hear from the parties going down the line. Dr. Lieb.
Thank you. Chair Sullivan, are you chairing today?
I'm at the moment.
Okay. So the department.
I wouldn't refer to me as a chair if you were just to see us out, though, in the hallways. The actual chair may get annoyed about that.
She's actually taking command of the meeting, and she does so well. So.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
You could get the pay, too, that comes with the chair today, Chair Sullivan, the extra pay bump you get, though.
So the department appreciates Commissioner Partridge putting this together. I think it's a good summary of the docket. We support this direction, and I think the range discussion, since others are opining on that, I think having a range is appropriate, and it's not unusual for us to do that. We have a range on some of the carbon costs in the electric side, so it gives folks some sort of opportunity to model different numbers and support that, and we can litigate it when we get to the actual resource plan. We think the 5 to 75 is an appropriate range. I think the only question we had was on the 2035 for the distribution system costs. I think everything else is 2030, so we liked the symmetry of having everything be 2030. Maybe if you want to keep the 2035, feeling that those are also more uncertain regulations, going to the 0 to 13 range, but keeping it at 2030, which would give us a little bit of flexibility, but also allow us, if there is a significant change in the environment by 2030, not to have to go back and rediscuss that. But otherwise, this looks fine to us.
Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan, Commissioners. I would echo a lot of what Dr. Lieb just shared. I think the framework, the direction works really well and does represent sort of how we understand IRPs on the electric side already work, and so assume gas IRPs will as well, in terms of running multiple scenarios and then allowing parties to weigh in on which are more likely or more appropriate. In terms of the specifics, I think with the one range that still exists in scenario 3 for the $5 to $75 per ton carbon cost, we would want to make sure that, I think as you described it, Commissioner Partridge, that this is a look at a maximum regulation scenario, and so we would want to make sure that the utilities did at least one with the $75 per ton value and not just a mid-range. And then we share the concern about the start date of 2035 being far out into the future and kind of off of the other start dates. I didn't see it in the briefing papers. In our comments, we did support maintaining the current start date, this current effective date that's on the electric side of 2028 until that is updated, and then it would sort of automatically update on the gas side as well. So the start date was the only point we had an issue with, and then again, making sure that the maximum regulation scenario includes that $75 value. Otherwise, I think this looks like a good.
Thank you. Mr. Harsh.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioners, we will echo a lot of what's already been said about appreciating the framework put in place. The guidance provided certainly will be helpful as we build out our IRP. I think some of the concerns we had were discussed by Excel regarding the capability of the model to look at upstream and downstream methane emissions in addition to the $5 to $75 per ton costs at the end use, but it sounds like that is something that is able to be worked around. Regarding the range, we'd be happy to do a low end 5 and a high end 75, but I think having clarity about what the expectations are for how to address that range would certainly be useful. How many different runs you are looking for with that third row there, if it's 2 runs, a low and a high, or 3 runs, a low, medium, high, because it's not just going to be, my understanding is, a single run of that third row there. Generally speaking, we are still in favor of a single regulatory cost range. We do see that as generally being more flexible as it allows the commission and parties to reevaluate what regulatory costs make sense within a model. Any given time we reopen this issue, what served as the basis for regulatory costs 1 year can change in 2 or 3 years as the policy landscape changes. So we have some questions about maybe long-term complexity, but for the initial IRPs, this is certainly a workable solution, and we appreciate the work that was put into putting it together.
Thank you, Mr. Harsh. One thing and if my colleagues disagree, but I think when I see the 5 to 75 for end use, I mean, I think since there's a range there that demands its own little mini range, that you do a 5, you do a 40 and a 75, or a 5, a 35 and a 75, like that. That is, that means to me, like, you're getting the full kind of granular look at what those different carbon costs are doing for the end user. But I don't know how my colleagues feel about that, but that just kind of methodologically makes sense to me. So, and then, I'm going to go to people online. Maybe I'll come back. So I see Mr. Pranis. I'm sure you have a thought or two. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Sullivan, commissioners. So very much appreciate, and by the way, congratulations to now Chair Sullivan. But we really appreciate Commissioner Partridge's work, even though she did not include our suggestion for a negative low-end value, which was only partly serious. But I think partly to illustrate the deep concern we have with this sort of heavy invisible thumb on the scale that's really different than social cost of carbon, because it's integrated into what people are supposedly going to pay. And I think that the way Commissioner Partridge has laid it out is excellent. We would keep it exactly as is, because I think it allows us to see here are some very hypothetical, speculative scenarios for regulation that we should at least consider, but that we are not presenting a case that suggests that this is the future and therefore we should start spending a lot of money sort of based on guesses about future policy and politics. And so I think the $5 to $75 range is fine. I do think it's important. I think our understanding is that this is a case-by-case question, that each utility that comes in is trying to look at what do we actually think is possible and reasonable to expect and plan for. And so we're not just saying, well, the midpoint's probably somewhere between 5 and 75, if it's not even clear that there's a $5 carbon price, in the foreseeable future. And I think recent politics, as we pointed out, suggests that it's important to have this as sensitivities, not as a baked-in factor that's assumed to be true about costs.
Thank you. Does anybody else online, Dr. Rose, Ms. Hoffman-Malug, anybody else, would you like to weigh in? Dr. Rose, you turned your camera on quick.
I did. Yes, Commissioner Sullivan, I'd love to offer a few thoughts. First of all, thank you all for the opportunity to be here and be able to share some thoughts. A couple thoughts to share in terms of the new proposal. One is we certainly like the concept, the idea of having multiple scenarios, considering those different potential future contexts on what they might imply in terms of gas system transitions and emissions transitions is valuable in terms of generating useful information. We would highlight, though, that given the objective here, which is to account for the potential costs of future policy, that there's a couple of additional considerations. One is considering potential, I know people don't want to hear this, potential ranges for the methane values as well as the CO2 values. So there's certainly uncertainty regarding the potential constraints or implications of trying to constrain methane emissions as well. Two is to potentially try to identify Minnesota-specific values. Certainly the opportunities for transitioning to low emissions futures are unique in Minnesota and to the Minnesota-related activities, especially when you start going into the upstream where you're going to go beyond the borders of Minnesota in terms of trying to account for those emissions. So that's a type of information that could be put together in terms of characterizing the potential transition opportunities for Minnesota, both in terms of CO2 and methane-related transitions and the potential costs associated with those transitions. The uncertainties about those kinds of transitions are very real, right? So not only does thinking about different policies that might drive those changes in emissions, but other conditions such as associated with technologies and market conditions will affect the costs for the utilities as they consider how those transitions might potentially affect them. Another important issue here is thinking about the broader technology portfolios. So not just thinking only about gas, but thinking about what are strategies for managing emissions holistically. And I would encourage you to think about carbon dioxide removal in this context. as one part of that strategy, but also other types of offsets. They're an important part of trying to transition to low carbon futures. And when we look at global transitions for trying to achieve the Paris goals, carbon dioxide removal is essential for achieving those goals. So I would encourage that to be a part of this conversation as well. The last thing I'll mention is affordability. So understanding not only the emissions transitions, but understanding the price effects will be important for Minnesota customers and businesses.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. Ms. Hoffman-Malug?
Yes, good morning again. Joylyn Huffman-Malik from Minnesota Energy Resources Corporation. I'll echo the sentiments of what's been already stated. I think what is laid out in new decision option 22 is a very helpful structure. And again, continue to echo the thoughts that having commission direction with regards to how we should treat that range would be helpful in practice. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Wendt, or are you, I'm assuming you're fine. Okay.
I am, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. For the companies, I think I need some fundamental information. How long does it take to run the one scenario or one path of this computation when you do this modeling?
Excel, since you're in the middle of it, maybe you give us.
Thank you, Commissioner Hom. As Commissioner Tuma pointed out, I looked back at our modeler and I did get a shrug. We are still in the
Mr.
process.
Shaw? Was he the modeler?
We do have a different modeler on our gas side, specializing in this. It is new work for the company. We are still in the process of getting everything set up, and we do not know yet the time that it would take to run one of these regulatory cost scenarios. We're using the Plexus model, which is different than the Encompass model, and so we also can't look to the electric side for guidance on the time either. So I apologize, but I don't, anything we said would be very approximate.
Yeah, my understanding is the complexity of the computational time also rely on how many alternatives you have in the modeling. Compared to the electric side, I don't think you guys have that kind of complexity in the gas side modeling. So given that, I don't know whether we need to argue too much about whether we need the range or the bookends, and because for the risk analysis, you have to run as much as you can given the time constraint and computational time constraint. It is about what you are going to report to the commission. I think that's what you are trying to say. But for now, I think you should run everything you can run given the range and to see what kind of outcome you are seeing. If I were you, I'll do that before you tell commission what number we are getting at. So given that, I don't know. I mean, I don't see a lot of concern, and I don't know whether you need the direction from commission, whether you run the bookends or some point, or I think for your own benefit, if I were you, I'll run everything and to try to see big picture. But that's just one sense opinion about what we are discussing may not have much impact to what you are trying to do. You have to do everything anyway, but you may want more direction, what you want to report to the commission, but this is the first round of the planning. I don't know whether we want to prescribe too much, and then we want to see what you are getting out of what you are trying to do. But yeah, I have no concern with the range, but I think, I hope we don't discuss too much about whether you need the bookends or the certain number of runs and other things. But that's what I'm trying to find out here.
Thank you, Commissioner Hom. I think that is helpful framing for our first gas IRP that we will be filing. I think absolutely true that it's very helpful to look at all of the information since this is a new filing. I also think that means that as the commission has done on the electric side, and as another party I believe pointed out earlier, the commission and parties working together will continue to have the ability to refine our approach over time. So I agree that, having information up front is helpful. I also think we are still balancing that with not wanting to, for example, provide, 20 different regulatory scenarios for the commission. And certainly after we receive this guidance today, we will take that back and look at what we think based on the guidance and based on anything additional that we may do will be useful to bring to the commission for decision making. So weighing that, having all of that information with, not providing so much information that it's hard to cull through and really understand the value and the points that come out of the information. But I am fine if the commission adopts this 5 to 75 range. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. So I wanted to address the range in my thinking, which doesn't necessarily have to be what we decide certainly today, but I think as a number of people pointed out, the sensitivities or scenarios, whichever we'd like to call them here, do kind of represent business as usual all the way down to, I think Ms. Curry called it the max regulation scenario. And so I think that this kind of is a bookend in and of itself. I'll be really honest. The idea that in 2030 the federal government would institute a tax on emissions at the customer level is pretty hard for me to believe. And the idea that it would be $75 per ton is even harder for me to believe. So this is more of just let's max it out and kind of understand what that would look like, with the understanding that 2030 is an unrealistic date. And I'll eat my words and, do an ice bucket challenge or something if I'm wrong, but which would be really one of my the least attractive things I can imagine. So you got me. It's on record. But I do think it's quite unlikely. I think the idea is let's put forth a scenario that just shows us if you maxed out regulation at an incredibly early date, like what would that do? I don't think that that's going to be, if I'm being honest, I don't think that's going to be probably the route that we would take, but I think it is going to inform us about potential risks in the future. I think the reason that I chose 2030 for federal, production level regulations and then 2035 for distribution system regulations is because I think that is fairly likely. I do think we have a rule on the books that's not being implemented currently under the current administration. I could foresee if there is a change in 2028 in the party who is in the White House, that same regulation may be picked up and put right back into place. Similarly, I think that leakage on the distribution system, particularly as we get better collectively at measuring it, may be something that we start to see regulation around. These are dates that I just think are likely. And so I would characterize number 2 as this is the likely future state. And I think we really need to take that seriously. If we want to move the distribution system emissions regulation down to 2030, that's quite possible. But I'm just giving you a little context for why I did that. As far as the range, for number 3, for the customer level emissions, having a number in there is going to show us directionally what that signal does. It can be 5, it can be 35, it can be 75. It's going to show us what direction is that going to push us. And then the magnitude is just going to scale with the number that we select. So I think to Commissioner Ham's point, I would look to the utility to run some different scenarios and say, this is the threshold at which we really see that direction. We really see that impact. I've also been surprised many times about how putting in numbers into an existing modeling tool like Plexos can kind of result in some bizarre and illogical outputs. So I just wanted to provide a range so that you could also ensure that we're not getting some sort of illogical, unintended breaking of the model itself. And I can't remember exactly what caused that, but I do remember that happening in a electric IRP scenario. So that's just context. And again, I did want to address a couple of things. One is this is iterative. Let's try some stuff. This is the minimum. If these are giving you strange results, I want you to work with parties. I know the department, the clean energy organizations, and other parties will be, LIUNA will be involved in these conversations, and you can continue to iterate, and maybe you come back and you say, we started with these and they all looked nutty, and here's what we came up with. And that's fine too. I just want to get us going in the direction, taking some steps forward on this. To Dr. Rose, I appreciate some of the detailed issues you raised. I will just say a couple things. One is that this is such a narrow docket to talk about the regulatory cost of carbon. The Commission in October of 2024 issued an extensive order that laid out, I think, 60 different requirements for gas resource planning that includes consideration of other costs, of other technologies, et cetera. I agree it would be great if we had these Minnesota-specific values, but I think at this point, the most important thing to do, and I will take this from my fellow Commissioner Sullivan, doing more resource plans is better than doing perfect resource plans. So let's start planning, let's start investigating what it looks like. Let's get some experience doing this, and then we'll continue to learn. And I don't think we should delay until we have perfect numbers, though.
I agree with everything you said, especially the part about more resource plans better than.
Where did that smart idea come from?
Direct quote.
I want to make sure that everybody has had the opportunity to respond. Are we good? Are there any additional Commissioner questions for parties? Okay. One thing I wanted to follow up, and I think this is for Mr. Harsh, and I'm just going back, and I'm not remembering where I read it in the record, but I had seen it, that CenterPoint was suggesting or was concerned that you would be treating these like regulations. Can you help clarify what I read or what was said?
Chair Sullivan, happy to clarify those statements. So we were, in our initial comments, we did not have at that point in time a recommendation for the max range of regulatory costs, and so we were trying to lay out how we were viewing these regulatory costs, what are their intent, what are the goals, how could they be misused, and structuring that to explain, hopefully by the time in our reply comments when we actually have our recommendation for the max range, why we came to that recommendation. And what we were explaining was we see the regulatory cost of carbon as, I think described by Commissioner Partridge, as an estimate of the likely costs due to regulations that will be impacting utilities and their customers in the near future being 5-10 years or so, within that kind of range of when we're able to accurately predict the future to the, I don't know if you can ever actually accurately predict the future, but and what we were explaining in those comments was that we could see a scenario where if the regulatory costs were misused in such a way that we predict, costs being astronomical, that could allow the regulatory cost of carbon to function as a sort of regulation when its intent is a tool, because utilities would be modeling these costs as actual costs that are impacting the company and its customers, not as, I think the externality costs are kind of the costs that are not internalized by the utility. And so if we're modeling these as actual costs that we are predicting and preparing for, and those costs are set at a point that is wholly unrealistic with what we actually anticipate experiencing, in that way it would function kind of as a form of quasi legislation instead of as a modeling tool. And
Basically, if we were not using the tools as a way to assess risk, but we were using them as a way to, we're going to order this pursuant to this high bookend, then it is kind of de facto regulation. That was your argument.
Correct. And the reason for explaining that was, again, to kind of set up how we were viewing this tool and the considerations we were making as we were trying to figure out what that high range should be, because at that time we hadn't recommended a high range. So we were describing how we viewed that high range and the considerations we were making in making that determination.
Okay, thanks for that clarity there in the follow-up. As I reviewed that, I was like, that's not the way I look at it. I wanted to make sure that it's clear that, I mean, I view this as a way to assess risk. And this is why when we talk about scenarios, and this is why when we talk about scenarios in the electrical discussion around, cost of carbon, it's like, I like more scenarios. Helps me see the waterfront and everything that's there, and I like being able to have additional scenario runs as well, because my brain will go to what questions I have, and if you see a different run, then you can isolate certain questions, or you can get inferences or answers out of that to help inform the judgment that the commission ultimately makes. So that's how I view this, and that at the end of the day, customers are not actually going to see a one-to-one correlation in their bill to what we're doing in these models. So, any additional, Commissioner Hom, Partridge, we're good? Commissioner Tuma? Good. Commissioner Sieben? Okay. All right. Does everybody, we've been going now for almost an hour. Do we need to take a break before motion, or are we ready for a motion?
I can make a motion.
All right, Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I am going to make the motion in opposite order, just for fun, for Jamie, because, sorry, Mr. Blodgett. Just to make it fun. Okay, I move.
No emotion evinced by him. Cool as a cucumber.
I am going to move Partridge new decision option 22, and then decision option 20. And just to clarify, decision option 20 would just delegate authority to the executive secretary to open comment periods for future resource plans.
Right. Okay. Commissioner Partridge? Is that it?
That's
Anything
it.
else?
I don't think so.
No other data source values, mission scope?
I believe that they're all embedded within the table.
Okay.
Unless someone sees something I'm missing, which is.
I wasn't expecting your motion to be
so simple.
That simple and
Yeah.
concise.
This is modeling and planning after
That's
all.
why
It
I made
can't
a
be simple.
table. The table is the complicating factor.
Do you mind if I take 1 minute just to confirm?
Not at all. Go for it.
Okay, we're going to take 1 minute. I'll be right back. Dr. Dornfeld. All right, we can come back to our
Last week.
regularly scheduled programming. I think that I just want to check in with the department. Is everything good?
We're good.
All right. All right, we can move to a vote. Commissioner Partridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Hom,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuma,
Yes.
Commissioner Sieben.
Yes.
I also vote yes. The motion passes. Thank you to all the parties. And I'm going to now take a 5-minute break. And then we will come back at 11:05 for the remainder of our agenda. We're going to start back up. Okay, now we can move on to our third agenda item for the day. Mr. Lobby, if you could introduce the matter, and if parties who are going to be speaking on this, if you could come forward or turn your cameras on so that we can introduce you. Mr. Lobby.
Good morning, Chair Sullivan and Commissioners. Item number 3 is for docket numbers ET-2, E-017, ET-6135, E-100/CN-24-263, and TL-24-264 in the matter of Great River Energy, Otter Tail Power Company, Western Minnesota Municipal Power Agency, Agrolite Electric Co-op, and the City of Benson for a certificate of need and route permit for the Appleton to Benson 115 kilovolt transmission line project. The questions before the Commission are: should the Commission adopt the Administrative Law Judge's findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation? Should the Commission determine that the environmental assessment is adequate? Should the Commission grant a certificate of need for the 115 kilovolt Appleton to Benson transmission line project? Should the Commission grant a route permit for the 115 kV Appleton to Benson project? On Friday, January 16th, Commissioner Tuma filed modified decision options into the record. Also on Friday, January 16th, PUC EIP filed a correction to pages 10 and 11 of the briefing papers, where the requested language for permit condition 5.3.9 was transposed under the incorrect party. On January 20th, the applicants filed their comments on decision options in response to Commissioner Tuma's modified decision options, and copies of these documents are available on the table next to the entrance door, and I do have copies of Commissioner Tuma's modified decision options up here if anybody up here needs a copy.
Great.
I have no further remarks, but I am available for questions. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Lobby. And we'll start on my left, if you could introduce yourself for the record, and we'll just go all the way down the line.
Sam Weaver. I am the Environmental Review Manager for this project, and this is my first time before the Commission, so apologies for any lack of decorum on my end.
No worries at all. This is Commissioner Tuma. He will have many, many questions for you. Ms. Bump.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioners, Samantha Bump on behalf of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources.
Good morning, Commissioners. Haley Waller-Pitts, Frederickson and Byron on behalf of the applicants.
Good morning. Mark Strophus, Great River Energy applicant.
Good morning. George Vinson, Otter Tail Power.
Welcome, everybody. Okay, we can now turn to no opening statements, so we will turn to Commissioner questions. Commissioner Tuma.
Yeah, we'll go backwards. I kind of like Commissioner Partridge's started going backwards. So we'll start with trees. You see my decision option.
I thought you were going to start. Is there like an opportunity for a 1 foot tall fence here?
Yeah, that's right. No fences, right? Ms. Bump, no fences in this one. Good. Let's start with trees, which would be my 7E, which would be a modified new 6.11 that was suggested for the permit. Mr. Lobby had put it in there under some understanding that there's a desire among some commissioners to have some tree replacement policy generally for our siting and permitting. So we're kind of working that out. I would agree with Ms. Waller-Pitts' assertions in her late file response that this route was designed to minimize impact on trees. I have had a chance to drive the route, buzzed right by Shooter's Bar and Grill there in Appleton, and was actually looking at other routes, but so did this one, very short, very straightforward. I think those who did the routing did an excellent job of finding our way through this area. It is a unique area with somewhat rolling hills and it's a beautiful area, but it is mostly agriculture, and they follow existing lines that are already there, reconfiguring some of them a little bit, and there's a little bit of green space, but nothing that we're going through massive forests. This is an old prairie area. It does cross two significant tributaries to the Minnesota River, where there is some vegetation that is what we would call trees. And so it does still have trees, and it also has some landowners that it crosses, or because it's a bigger facility and a different set of right-of-way, it would possibly remove trees from landowners' residents, and that's what is laid out in the EA. Mr. Weaver, good job. I enjoyed your EA, and I had a chance to read it, and it does address the fact that there are some trees, and it deals with and it addresses that. And so we're looking at this, and I guess I would say that it is both a positive for you that there are very few trees that are going to be impacted, but also you can turn it on its head and say, well, there's very few trees that are impacted. You could say it just with a different inflection, going, this doesn't look like it's going to be that expensive to deal with in the EA or in the in your vegetation management plan. You laid out this. We could amend the vegetation management plan. It just came up as an order suggested by Mr. Labby. And in the vegetation management plan, you do talk about working with landowners on the removal of trees. You will compensate them potentially for a loss of trees. That's a very common activity when you're dealing with eminent domain. I know our folks that have done this will look at a piece of property. If you take a tree, you sometimes compensate for it. I think what has been looked for going forward is still do that compensation, but we need to think about replacement. You're having conversations with these landowners that you're removing trees from, because you ask them, do you want to keep the tree stumps? That's part of your policy. It's in the vegetation management plan. It's a very common practice. You'll cut it down to 10 feet and let them cut it up if they want to have firewood or do whatever they want with it. Or you remove it, and as you indicated in the vegetation management plan, that will be removed at the contractor's decision. You indicate likely that'll be landfilled at the landfill there in Swift County. And so that's what we have. This would be, I'm going to guess after driving it, I probably would guess maybe a couple dozen trees would be my guess that you're going to be dealing with, and maybe at best a handful of landowners that you'd have to talk to. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but you're accurate, Ms. Waller-Pitts, that this is the first time we've done it in a transmission. Arguably, we did it with the situation up in for the Boswell solar, because it was also a solar transmission line, and we did require any replacement for the line there, which was very short. This one not being long, not a lot of trees. Just kind of framing it up. Commissioner Sieben, I could go either way, and I'll kick it to you. I just wanted to lay out the rationale for an inclusion in it, and then my changes are just to highlight the fact that I would like them to work with the landowners, and then also highlight the cost recovery is just for our friends in Otter Tail. It's a direct cost for our friends at the cooperative, which I'm assuming are going to be working with their owner members as they cut through their property. So I'm not all worried about this, but I think it's a good standard that we've been trying to accomplish, and I'll kick it to you, kind of what you're thinking on the 7F, the tree requirement.
Commissioner
On
7E.
7E.
Is that, yes,
that is up on the screen here. I think it's fine. I think the characterization that, and I didn't yet review Ms. Waller-Pitts' late filed comment, so I'll do that here when we get a second. But I think the general idea that this is not like incredibly new ground. It may be on a transmission line, in particular a standalone transmission line, but I don't think it's that innovative or anything other than what applicants should expect. That in the future, if you're in our sample permit, if you're going to be taking down trees, you should work on a plan to replace them. And I'm fine with the way that you first kind of put them towards the impacted property owners, and then in Swift County and near the project area. So I don't know what else you're looking for, Commissioner Tuma. I appreciate that you added this in, and I think it's something that, we've been working with staff on getting it into the sample permit and bringing it forward in different site permits that are coming forward before the commission now. So I'm in favor of it.
I would look to Ms. Waller-Pitts then, just the response. I mean, I put it in there. I know this is something that was Commissioner Sieben was concerned about, what she wanted to be thinking about tree replacement going forward. And I do think we are plowing, not totally new ground, but it's a little bit different because this is an all transmission project.
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Tuma. We understand from the comments today that this may be something that the Commission is interested in kind of pursuing more broadly on transmission lines, right? But we need to address the project that we're here for today, and the tree replacement plan condition. We have to provide some comments related to this specific project because this is the first time this is being raised in this record. And so for this particular project, understanding, right, the magnitude of trees may not be very high, but this is the first time, I think, as applicants here, we're having the opportunity to present some of the practical considerations to the Commission, the cost considerations that come on imposing this, not only this project, but if you're thinking ahead to other projects too, right? With respect to the coordination with landowners, as Commissioner Tuma noted, that is something that's already happening as part of every easement acquisition, right? Tree removal, compensation for tree removal is part of every easement acquisition process that the utilities already go through, right? That's something the landowners are already compensated for. And if there is a requirement to, in addition to compensating landowners as part of that easement, to also pay to plant trees elsewhere, the utilities are essentially paying, utilities, ratepayers, customers, paying for those trees twice. I think the companies have some concerns about how that may work.
Ms. Waller-Pitts, sorry to interrupt, but I don't understand that. I think the way that it would work, and it worked in previous projects, is if you're cutting down a tree in the project area, Commissioner Tuma's language is saying you can count the trees that you're already doing for screening by impacted landowners. Otherwise, you need to work out a plan with the DNR and the local county on how those additional trees will be replaced. So what do you mean that you're paying for the same tree twice?
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Chair, Commissioner Sieben, thank you for the question. As part of the easement acquisition process, right, if trees need to be cleared on a property, that the compensation for those trees is included as part of the overall easement payment. The utilities do not replant the trees typically unless the landowner has a specific request, and Mr. Strofus can probably speak more to that, but replanting trees is not a typical part of the easement acquisition process. The compensation to the landowner is part of that process. And here...
So for this particular... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify too, we'll have a 100-foot right-of-way for this project. That'll be the extent of the utilities' land rights, right? And so if the idea is to coordinate with landowners on planting trees elsewhere on their property, that may be an additional cost. And here, where we have a lot of agricultural areas, it may be that the landowners don't want trees elsewhere on their property, in which case, again, you'd be compensating the landowner for the tree removal as part of the easement acquisition process, and then also compensating Swift County or whoever it may be to plant trees elsewhere.
Here's where I think I would draw a distinction, because it's easy to kind of start now getting down to the specifics, a tree from a particular landowner. And I really do separate that out from this policy, even though I was the one that commingled them, just because you're already there working with the landowner and they may want a tree. Actually, Steel Waseca came through and was cutting trees off my parents' property. It was kind of like, oh, well, you're here. Can you come cut this tree? That's not in the right-of-way down. That's typically what happens with most right-of-way situations is they're willing to they want to get a deal from the tree cutting guy to do it a little cheaper than it is usually to plant a tree. I get that. That happens quite often. But I think there's a difference here. When you're paying for that tree that you're removing off of say a farmstead, someone planted a tree, it adds value to that property. And when you cut that tree down and you compensate for it, you're really compensating for the loss of the value of the property as opposed to paying for the tree, okay? And a lot of times you just leave the tree there with the landowner and you don't say, oh, by the way, we're going to discount, $10 off your easement because we left you that tree. You're actually doing a benefit to the utility by the landowner taking the tree because they don't have to now pay Swift County to dispose of it. So I understand that those relationships are going on, but there's a distinction here. That is a relationship for the easement. I've conflated a little bit by saying we want a policy, a general overall policy for the community and for our state is that if we are going to be removing a carbon sink, a tree, we should be actually doing an effort to plant another tree. It's probably a seedling. We're not talking about when you cut down a 20-foot tree, you got to go find a 20-foot tree to replace it on their property. I think the intent was we want to know that we are being good stewards of the earth that we've been given, and we're going to cut a tree down, we're going to plant a tree. And so I think that by asking the landowner, if I plant a tree on your property, a seedling, would you like it on your property? And they would go, yeah, I need some more back in my wind protection row back there. Go ahead, plant me a nice spruce tree back there. And that's, I think, what we're trying to tie these things together, but they really are two separate things. So we're not paying twice for the tree. We're paying for the impact we're doing on the nature, and then we're also paying for the damage to somebody's lot by removing a tree and reducing their property value. So I don't see it as double paying. It is an extra cost, no question. But we're not asking for a big program. We're not asking for you to, make it difficult. In Boswell, we said, if you're providing seedlings to Itasca County, provide more seedlings. Okay, in this situation, you're already on the ground. Just ask the landowner if they want it. You got cut down 24 trees. Well, only 2 of the landowners wanted trees, and we still now have 22 trees that we need to ask Swift County where should we plant them. More than likely, you're going to plant them right by the Chippewa River in Benson because you're probably cutting a few down right there anyways. And so it should be that simple of a plan, that simple of an effort. I think that's what your intention is, Commissioner Sieben. I don't want to speak for you. I put it in because I know this is important to you, and so I'm trying to envision what we're doing in the future, and that's what I would envision. They're two separate things, but while we're working on the people's property, let's at least make an offer. We'll plant a seedling for you.
Commissioner Sieben, do you have any additional?
I think there's already a part in the condition of the route permit, which, as has been pointed out, that the applicant shall use care to preserve the natural landscape and minimize tree removal and prevent any unnecessary destruction of the natural surroundings in the vicinity of the transmission facility during construction and maintenance. And so tree replacement plan, as has been done in other dockets before the commission, needs to be filed 2 weeks prior to pre-construction. As Commissioner Tuma said, it's not like there's not a size requirement that is particularly onerous or maybe actually expensive. The applicant needs to work with the DNR and the county as outlined in the decision option to count the number of trees that are removed. It's intended to encourage the applicants to minimize the tree removal and then work with the surrounding resource agencies to come up with a tree replacement plan. So I'm supportive of it and don't think that it's as big of a deal as it's made out to be by Ms. Haley Waller-Pitts at this point.
All right. Anything additional that you'd like to add, the applicants?
Thank you, Chair. Understand where the commissioners are coming from. Again, because this is kind of the first time that we've had the chance to respond to this, I just wanted the commission to be aware of the potential cost. And I think Mr. Strophus has kind of a high-level cost estimate, understanding that may not change the decision here today, but I think it would be helpful for the commission to be aware of
Mr. Strophus.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. We have recently just went through a tree replacement plan on a project up north, primarily because we're clearing out poplar. Poplar's not a highly valuable species of tree, and that's costing us in the order of $25,000 an acre. So I will agree with Commissioner Tuma that this isn't heavily wooded here, but if we run into a project where we have a good solid 10 acres, that's $250,000. We take our rates serious with respect to protecting our member rates, and that's an additional cost we find is somewhat unreasonable. As we get into higher valued tree species, we understand the condition here says we'll work with Bowser and DNR. We've had issues with DNR, similar issues on other projects where we did some tree evaluations. It could be significantly more costly than that.
The tree removal costs $250,000 an acre, right?
No, the tree replacement costs are $25,000 or $250,000 for 10 acres.
So like planting seedlings?
Yes, yes. So a little perspective there. We have 345 kV projects.
And
Commissioner Sieben.
Mr. Strophus, I appreciate that. Do you have an estimate of the number of trees that are going to be removed for this project? Are we talking thousands, hundreds, tens of thousands, or hundreds of trees? Given that some is in existing right-of-way, I find it hard to believe it's going to be multiple acres of tree replacement.
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Sieben, I'll respond to that if I may. The record we have right now shows that the project right-of-way would cross approximately 10 acres of wooded area, understanding that not all of that vegetation would qualify for replacement under any tree replacement plan, but we're looking at about 10 acres. I understand to be able to have a better idea of the specific number of trees, there would have to be a survey.
Ms. Bump, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I guess I would look to you. I don't know if you have any experience. Obviously, we're in an area of tree removal and replacement, and we look to you to help out. Is that the experience that it costs that much to replace poplar trees? I'm surprised, but
Poplars were not expensive. I thought he said they like the hardwoods and the.
Yeah, I just heard a number, and it was for poplar trees. Is all I heard. I don't know.
Was it for poplars? Is that what?
Commissioner Tuma, Chair Sullivan. Yes, that was my coworker's assessment as to what the general forested area looked like was primarily poplar.
Okay.
The estimate that do you have a contractor? You hire contractors to do the replacement, or what? How does?
Yes. We worked with a particular agency that was involved. It was not DNR. It was not Bowser, to coordinate and come up with a reasonable payment, and we made that payment to the agency, and they'll do the associated tree planting with those funds.
So Ms. Bump. Put you on the spot, Ms. Bump, but if you have any knowledge, if you don't, that's okay.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Tuma, I do not have any background on the cost of tree replacement. I acknowledge what the Commission is attempting to do, and DNR appreciates that. And I can look into coordinating with other people, other staff within the DNR to see if we can potentially come up with some type of solution that will hopefully in for future situations be more cost effective. But I can't speak on behalf of the cost of replacing trees.
And I'm looking at our people that do our EAs, and that's maybe something we need to be considering, is looking at the cost of replacement and asking those questions. That's the handicap. You're right, Ms. Waller-Pitts, we're handicapped here because the record doesn't give us that information. And I can tell you I would be shocked to look at Otter Tail if you came back and said that for replacement of trees along here that you're going to charge the commission those type of numbers for a plan. I think the plan needs to be reasonable and prudent, and that seems to be somewhat excessive. But again, we're dealing on not solid information. That's what we have EAs for and do them. So,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I thought you were done.
That was my thought, yeah.
Commissioner Partridge.
I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents, which is I support tree replacement. I think the idea that we're talking about clearing trees without replacing them doesn't make any sense to me. You know, we're investing in clean energy resources to continue to maintain a healthy environment in Minnesota, and trees are critical to that healthy environment. It's also really critical to maintain public support for the infrastructure that we need in this state. And so I think the idea that we would not replace trees, whether they're, you know, a handful along this seemingly not wooded right of way, I don't know why we would make such a big deal out of it here today. And I think that it's important that we continue to maintain our beautiful landscape and our environment in Minnesota, along with these clean energy assets that we need for our state. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that this is an environmental consideration. It is a consideration for people's quality of life and support for our infrastructure and our continued need to build and improve that infrastructure. So I want to just lend my support to Commissioner Tuma's decision option that he proposed in 7E.
Yeah, I might want to break at some point. I might have some ideas and some language on that, but enough for trees now, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Again, going backwards, I'm on 7D now, and to the applicant, this is again another just a process I don't see as significant and important in this situation, but we've heard in other situations that Fish and Wildlife has been challenging, more likely in renewable energy projects. And so I just asked staff to look for opportunities where we can work with the DNR to fulfill our permit obligations, just in case there's a slow walk by the federal wildlife service, Fish and Wildlife Service. I don't see this going to be slow walk, but I was only offering it to you to put it in there to make it easier for you. If you don't want it, I don't need to do it, but I just wanted to know the rationale for why it's being put into permits going forward, and I'm going to suggest to my staff to continue to put that in there where we can have a situation where if it's being slow walked, we can go to the DNR to fulfill our obligations under our permits. So if you want it, I can put it in there. If you don't want it, I'm happy to take it out.
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Tuma. I think our clarification and comments was just that the applicants here will need to comply with Fish and Wildlife requirements, understanding the intent of the condition. If Fish and Wildlife is shut down for whatever reason, that the applicants still need to comply with their requirements. But to the extent that the idea is to separately allow for compliance with the Commission's permit, I don't see an objection to that.
I know you have to comply with them, but if it's getting slow walked, sometimes just an applicant would take a risk and say, "We're complying. We're going to take the risk. We want our permit." And in that situation, I would want to say, "Have you talked to DNR to make sure they're okay with your bat plan or your bald eagle plan?" So we have a check off. We've talked about this in the past, and Mrs. Bump said they could do that if they had to. Again, it's if we had a government shutdown or for whatever reason they've been informed from people to slow walk permits. I doubt they're going to slow walk a affordability / reliability transmission line. So Next is the turtles. Ms. Bump, I don't know if you have had a chance to talk to the applicant. I saw that their turtles were discussed in the EA and that ended up, according to the permit that was given to us by the judge, we talked about turtles in specific. There were other things we could have talked about, but for whatever reason, there was turtles in there. And so I'm happy there to be turtles in there. It was the applicant who suggested the new 7F language, which appeared in another permit, which also, that, by the way, that permit had specific conditions regarding eagles and bats and other things too. So I don't understand this conversation. I'm happy to do both. I'm happy to do either. I'm happy to do even some other language, because I even put a placeholder in there for you. So I'm happy to do whatever you guys want to do on turtles, and under, which I have no idea what it is, a natural heritage review. So you tell me what you want in this permit, and then we'll hear what the applicant wants.
Ms. Bump.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Tuma, thank you very much. We do not object to 7F. As the Natural Heritage Review letter states, there are certain avoidance measures that are required to mitigate impacts to Blanding's turtles. There are instances where the Natural Heritage Review letter will require an avoidance plan. As we are not opposed to having an avoidance plan done, as the Natural Heritage letter did not require it and just required certain measures, we feel that 7F would adequately address that.
And so it would be, as the applicant suggested, duplicative. We could just do 7F and not do 7C, anything with the turtles in specific in the permit?
Yeah, you're correct. 7F would be adequate.
So, okay, so no 7C at all, but do 7F. Is that, and that was your suggestion, Mrs. Waller-Pitts, so I'm assuming you're fine with that. Okay.
Working backwards from there?
That's, everything else I think was okay with the applicant. My understanding of the rest of the two new decision options with regards to 7 and 9 are okay with you, right?
Okay. Did you still need a minute or two?
I do need a minute.
Okay.
If that's okay. 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. We'll take 5 minutes to get everything in order, and we will be back with the motion. We are in recess. Okay. We ready, Mary? All right, welcome back, everybody. And then Commissioner Hom had a couple questions regarding, well, I will let you say what it's regarding, but he has a couple questions.
Thank you.
Before we move to the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sullivan. No, it's not a question about some fact check with the applicants. I think how many substations are involved in this proceeding and how many entities are involved in that? I read, but I think there are 4 or 5 different entities got involved with the multiple substations.
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Chair, Commissioner Hom, you are correct. There are 5 applicants in this proceeding and there are 6 substations.
Okay, yeah. I'm really happy to see the Minnesota utilities, municipal utility co-ops, and investor utility working together and making this kind of baseline reliability project going on time. I think this is a really good thing because we are seeing some challenging situation in this transmission planning process, but I'm really happy to see that Minnesota utilities working together. Along the line, also need claim that area of Benson is expecting load growth. I'm really happy to see that. It is not a data center. It is a more organic growth. I hope Benson area gets more job because after Fibromin shutdown, I think you had some concern with the job there. But I am very happy to see that you guys have an organic growth in that area. And this transmission line is supposed to serve in 2. One is compensating the reliability issue due to the Fibromin shutdown, and then serving the load growth for next 4 or 5 years. So I think this is a really good news, in addition to this all other things. But I just want to point that out.
Thank you for making that point. I think that's important. So thank you, Commissioner Hom. Are there any additional questions before we move to our motion? Okay, Commissioner Tuma.
Let's go for it. And I agree with you, Commissioner Hom. This is a good project, and haven't had a chance to also drive it. It's not only a good project from a reliability standpoint. I think you guys did a pretty good job putting a project together, finding a route. As you know, I dive into the weeds or the brush, literally. So good work. Decision option 1, 2, and then 7A, 7B, 7D, and then 7E with a modification that when the permit submits a plan, they'll submit a cost estimate, and if they modify the cost estimate or the program because of its cost being unreasonable and prudent, they can lay that out for us at the time they do their filings prior to construction. We certainly don't want this to be an unreasonable and expensive project. Certainly not the numbers that we're bantied about today. And we're hoping this is a very inexpensive project that you just ask the contractors to implement as they go out there and work with the landowners. So tell us what that is, and we'll keep track of what's going on in the future. So 7E as modified on the screen, and then a 7F, which is the Natural Heritage Review, which will be replacing the Bland and Turtle language in the permit. And then TUMA Revise 9A, or TUMA New 9B, and then also 11. So I think I got it covered there, Mr. Lobby. He's giving me a thumbs up.
The motion clear?
No, it's not.
Commissioner.
Sorry.
Commissioner Sieben.
Sorry, it's hard to track who's talking or who was about to talk there. Was it our staff?
Yes.
Yep. We were just asking Mr. Blodgett if the motion was clear. But would you like us to read, would you like Commissioner Tuma to read it again?
I would.
On the new language in 7E.
Yes.
Commissioner Tuma.
Yes, so 7E, we're adding.
So, Commissioner Tuma, I see what you're adding, and the applicant gets to propose a modification to the tree replacement plan, and then who gets to decide whether that modification is sufficient or not?
Typically, that would be Mr. Weaver and Mr. Lobby. So,
How would that work? Like normally under pre-construction meeting, if applicant comes in and proposes something that is different from what the commission ordered, then is that the way it has the ability to say, like, this is a reasonable modification? Like, what if the applicant comes in and says, we're not going to do it? I don't necessarily want to put Mr. Lobby or our staff in the position of having to decide whether or not that's a appropriate modification.
actually, they already are on a regular basis. They have to make that decision that whatever conditions that we put in the permit are being met, and if they feel they're not being met, it's very rarely that these happen, but they have happened in the past where they said, nope, we're going to schedule this for a meeting in front of the commission to make a determination whether your modifications are for reasonable costs that are imprudent and unreasonable. And so that's the decision they make at that pre-construction meeting. We've kind of authorized them basically to do that. It happens on a regular basis. We don't see it in the background because typically it handles very well by our staff and our applicants. It's so I can only remember a couple times. I'm looking at Mr. Eck or Agnes, that this has ever happened, that it's come back to us where there is an unreasonable action, but it certainly can.
Okay, I think I need a break.
Sure.
Sullivan to talk to staff because I'm not sure I'm understanding this or comfortable with this.
Okay.
New
How long
language.
do you think how long would you like?
5 minutes.
Okay. We will come back at 12 noon. We are in recess until 12 noon. we ready? All right, we are back. Commissioner Sieben.
Thanks, Chair Sullivan. I just worked with staff on new language that hopefully Mr. Blodgett can put on the screen, and the intent is the same as Commissioner Tuma's. It just backs it up from the pre-construction meeting timing of the filing of the tree replacement plan to be a compliance filing tied to the date of the order. So the intent here is that we get the applicant to work on the tree replacement plan with existing landowners and the DNR and the county, and then file it as a plan, a compliance plan. So the result is the same. It's just like moving it up prior to see if we can work out any issues there may be much further ahead than the pre-construction meeting. And so this says you can see it would be the green language, and the 60 days of the order was sort of a guess, so that can be modified too. But the idea being that we'd give the applicant more time to work on this and to file it so that our staff would be able to review it and EIP would be able to review it in advance of the pre-construction meeting. So that's what I was thinking, Commissioner Tuma.
Commissioner Tuma.
Comfortable, I guess, hear from the applicant.
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the intent of both the revised language from Commissioner Tuma and the revised language from Chair Sieben as well. We would ask that instead of within 60 days of the order, it be changed to something like at least 3 months before the start of construction or something along those lines, because we will not have enough time within 60 days to coordinate with all of the landowners along the route, as well as DNR, as well as the county.
So would, I don't know, 30 days before the pre-construction meeting or something like that work? Or?
Okay.
You okay with that, Commissioner Sieben?
Commissioner Sieben?
Yes, recognizing that if there's still a problem, then you're getting close to impacting construction. And so, that's why I was thinking like much sooner than construction is better than waiting till a month before construction. If you file something that is not going to work, Ms. Waller-Pitts, then you're taking that risk that you're impacting construction. So that's why I was trying to tie it to the date of the order.
I just said 30 days out of the
and
there, yeah. So Ms. Waller-Pitts,
Ms. Waller-Pitts, when are you proposing to start construction?
Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Thank you, Chair and Chair Sieben. I'm sorry, I don't know how.
It's fine. You can go either one.
Yeah, okay. The construction on this project is anticipated to start in early 2028. After a route permit is issued, the utilities will go out and start doing coordination with landowners, acquisition of easements. So we just do need more time than 60 days to do that. I think the timing here is also informed by, on the vegetation management plans for the last few projects, kind of how long that takes for those to come together, thinking that this may be a similar time frame, and understood that that if there is an issue, that's on the permittees at that point to raise in a timely fashion to be able to maintain the construction schedule. So whether it's 30 days prior to the pre-construction meeting or 60 days prior to the pre-construction meeting, either one of those is workable.
You get to pick.
What if it was 90 days? 90 days prior to the pre-construction meeting, Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Thank you. That works. Yep.
90 days it is.
And can we just confirm with Mr. Eknes or
Mr. Willab
that
Mr.
90
Labby.
days works for them?
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Sieben, that 90 days works.
All right. That works. All right.
So renew my motion, but to modify, just to make sure everybody's clear, TUMA Modified 7, all of the language of TUMA Modified 7, including the preamble at the top. And that's 7A, 7B, 7D, 7E as modified by Commissioner Sieben, and then 7F, and then also TUMA revised 9A and TUMA new 9B, all the language that's on the TUMA filing. Mr. Blodgett, am I?
Mr. Blodgett?
Also 9.
9, also 9, yes. The preamble language to 9A and 9B.
All right. Any questions, follow-up? Okay, with that, we can move to a vote. Commissioner Partridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Hom?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuma?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieben?
Yes.
I also vote yes. The motion passes. Thank you to the parties, and thank you to our commission staff, Mr. Alabi. Thank you, as always. We appreciate the work. And now we can move on to our final item.
So bad, Mr. Weaver, was it? Good.
Just wait until we talk about fences. 6 feet, 10 feet. And if parties could come forward on the last docket of the day, this is will be introduced by Mr. Stolpus. And if everybody could come forward, or if you're online, if you could turn your camera on if you're planning to participate. All right, Mr. Stolpus, could you introduce the matter?
Good afternoon, Chair Sullivan. This docket involves two matters. Item number 4 involves two matters. Docket number E002/CM-23-212 in the matter of Northern States Power Company's petition for approval of PPAs for firm dispatchable resources. And docket number E002/RP-24-67 in the matter of Northern States Power Company's 2024 to 2040 Integrated Resource Plan. Matters before the Commission are: should the Commission approve the Invenergy Cannon Falls, Onward Mankato Energy Center, or MEC 1, Onward MEC Battery Energy Storage System, and the Desiree North Star Energy Power Purchase Agreements. Second issue is: should the Commission authorize Xcel to recover the Minnesota jurisdictional portion of the costs incurred under the agreements from Minnesota retail customers through the fuel clause rider. Third, should the Commission condition approval of the North Star and MEC BES agreements on a requirement that Xcel demonstrate new trade measure event costs are just and reasonable for ratepayers. Should the Commission determine that Xcel's shareholders may be required to bear future costs necessary to offset carbon emissions from the Cannon Falls Energy Center from 2040 to 2048. And finally, should the Commission require Xcel to resume negotiations in good faith with Invenergy for the Lake Wilson Solar Energy Center. I have no further comments, but I am available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stolpus. We'll start with party introductions, and I'm just going to start first with the gentleman online. If you could just introduce yourself for the record, and then we'll start. I will start with, on my left, Ms. Hinderly after that.
Sure. This is Greg Paul-Heber representing Invenergy.
Thank you.
Catherine Hinderly, Office of the Attorney General, Residential Utilities Division.
Amelia Voss on behalf of the Clean Energy Organizations.
Sydney Lieb with the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Lauren Steinhauser on behalf of Xcel Energy.
Ingrid Björklund on behalf of Invenergy.
Richard Savicle of Martin and Squires on behalf of Desiree.
All right, welcome everybody. We do not have opening statements, so we'll move first to Commissioner questions. Are there Commissioner questions? Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. It's my general statement. I was very frustrated with these dockets because there are so many things are protected. And then I don't know what kind of question I can ask during today's meeting. And then also there are some blanket protection. I mean, certain names, very generic item is being protected. I don't know how to address a lot of these questions without saying something, but
maybe
yes.
we could just turn to the company and ask why they need to protect that one particular thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things. For example, certain dates are even protected. Why we have to protect even dates? That means you are not really narrowing down that what is a really trade secret. And sometimes, yes, it takes time to do it, but I think for the transparency reason and for also how we can ask a question, we may need very narrow designation of this trade secret data. I mean, it's more just general concern about this docket. For the future docket, I hope we have a more careful designation of the trade secret portion of it, rather than we have a blanket protection.
Ms. Steinhauser?
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Hom, I agree that there is a lot that's marked trade secret. Some of it is our information. I believe some of it is information from the developers. There is a date that I'm thinking of that was protected, or a range maybe, but specific terms that were considered and then not taken, I think are protected, as we are in constant negotiations with developers right now. And so any terms that deviate from our standard PPA, which I understand is filed publicly with the RFP, we are protecting those in order to protect the commercial kind of integrity of those negotiations. Understood that it is aggravating to navigate.
I agree with you, Commissioner Hom. I am kind of in a position, I don't know what to do about it, but I would just jump in. Does anybody else have any thoughts? So I'm going to just start with Ms. Steinhauser. Like the Energy facility wanting to move beyond the, to end negotiations with them, to discussions with them. I'm curious, what would the company do if Invenergy is not selected? I mean, the project was at least part of a portfolio that was selected coming out of the resource plan. If it's not selected, then you're slightly out of sync with the resource plan. Help me understand why you don't want to move forward, given that to my mind, it's out of sync with where the resource plan was at.
Chair Sullivan, thanks for the question. At a high level, I think we are very comfortable, given all of the resources that we are proposing for approval today, resources that we have proposed for approval. So there's a 2024 RFP that I understand was recently filed for approval, and various other projects. We're comfortable with reliability and meeting the need that was identified in that plan without the Lake Wilson project. Now, if you want to get into like the specifics of why we don't feel comfortable moving forward further with that, I would bring up one of the many folks in the room to help talk about.
I'd be interested in hearing that. I want to turn to the department as well, because I know the department, has, I think, an interesting thought and an interesting suggestion. So I'd be interested to hear more about where the company is at. If you could just introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bornhofen, Director of Purchase Power for Xcel Energy.
And if you could just speak to, just what Ms. Steinhauser said, what is specifically, what is it, that, where's the impasse? What are the challenges? I know that there's issues. From my mind, this facility comes with a battery, a fairly sizable battery. I know there's significant congestion in there. We have the county, that has, indicated, there are significant issues with congestion and that is affecting property taxes. So I'm kind of curious, just at a high level, this project seems to check off some boxes, but I'm curious if you could give it a little bit more granularity around it.
Sure. Let me just say, you're correct in the fact that it does check off one box. One box is the battery. The battery is very attractive. It's great for the system. It's great for the area. The pricing was reasonable. The challenge with this project is it's not a battery project. It is a solar project. It happens to have a battery paired with the project. And the solar, unfortunately, is the challenge on the project. The solar increases congestion in the area. It's already a highly congested area. There's already significant curtailment in the area, significant congestion. LMPs, market rates representing congestion are very, very low in that area. And therefore, adding more solar in that area is going to be a challenge. It's going to hurt the transmission system. It's going to increase curtailments.
So the transmission system in that area, I mean, I understand, and it is certainly tight now, but, you know, there are proposals, and I would say like the help is on the way. I mean, thanks a lot to the work that Excel has been doing at MISO and other, like, there's new transmission planned for the region. You've got, you know, JTIQ lines coming, you've got LRTP lines, and these are long-lived assets. You know, I would think that the risk is on the developer in the short term before those lines come into play. So I'm just curious if you could give a little bit more granularity around what you're thinking, like, you know.
Yeah, you mentioned the risk is on the developer, and I'm not sure that I would agree with that. Under this proposal, the risk is entirely on the customer. Okay. So the customer bears all of that risk. They bear all of the congestion risk. They bear all of that LNP risk. Curtailment risk is all borne by the customer, which is, I mean, when you get really down to it, that is the main reason we've chosen not to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. Along that line of question on that project, why didn't Excel disqualify this project from at the gate? Because you have that concern. That concern wasn't new. Why didn't you just disqualify it?
Yeah, and I want to be careful here because you brought up a good point about trade secret information. So I want to be thoughtful of the party themselves. I don't want to speak too in detail here, but they did provide multiple bids in that RFP, and the bid where the customer would own the project was disqualified, primarily for that reason, but also there was some. They had yet to identify their supply chain. That was another problem with that bid package. The IPP bid package, meaning a PPA bid package, I think was allowed to move forward with the hope that we would be able to find common ground with the developer and have the developer bear some of that congestion risk. Unfortunately, we just weren't able to find a path where the developer could bear.
I don't know what I can say, but curtailment is a genetic language, so I'll say it. Curtailment risk can be borne by ratepayers or borne by IPP. Do you have a dispute with that term?
Do I have an issue with that term? No.
No, I mean, that is in dispute in your negotiation. Who's going to bear the risk of curtailments and congestion?
I'm not sure if that's the only issue, but yes, that is one of the issues, who would bear that risk. And right now, as it's being presented to us, the customer bears 100% of that risk.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know whether you're familiar with the biennial transmission line filing by Minnesota transmission owner.
I'm personally not, no.
Okay, so in 2025, November 1 or around that time, MTO filed that file. In that filing, section 9.6, MTO discussed that specific substation issue and then initially proposed, I think it's not final, maybe because I didn't review the whole thing, but 300 megawatt battery, standalone battery as a potential solution to it. I don't know the time frame of that battery, but isn't that battery good enough to deal with other issue potentially this project can create? Or that study didn't incorporate this project as a part of that study? I don't know. There is an appendix I didn't review.
Yeah, this is subject to check because for what I'm here to testify on or to speak to. But
Might ask for help behind
if
you.
it is the project I'm thinking of, that's a standalone project and it's 300 megawatts. That's a very attractive project to help alleviate congestion, help solve congestion issues, help reduce costs for curtailment.
Yeah, my question is, when you are doing that study, is this proposed by IPP was on the assumption or what, it wasn't part of that assumption? Because you said you had a concern with the solar portion of this contract. I don't know whether you had that in that assumption of doing that Noble substation study in that biennial transmission line. What was the assumption there? Which project was in, which project was not in?
I don't want to misspeak. I think I know the answer, but I don't want to misspeak. I'd have to defer to another member.
Sir, could you also just make sure everybody were speaking into the mic? It's hard for people to hear online.
Just slide another chair up too. If you get
Yeah, that's probably, slide another chair up. Ms. Steinhauser.
Thank you for the shuffle. I believe we have Jason standing online, and hopefully he can answer this question for us.
All right, Jason.
Apologies here.
Mr.
I'm just trying to unmute. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Good morning, Jason Stanton. I'm the Director of Transition and Planning. And I apologize, what was the question exactly? It's kind of hard to hear some of the back and forth. I can hear the commissioners just fine, but some of the commenters from the table, I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay, so I'll repeat my question. So you remember that 2025 biennial transmission line planning report that includes section 9.6, which is Noble County substation congestion issue. In that, I don't know whether that's a final solution, but the initial solution suggestion was a 300 megawatt battery.
Mr. Standing.
So the analysis that we did was based on a 300 megawatt assumed battery for that area and modifying it to a grid forming inverter with the IBRs. So what we looked at was kind of a two-part analysis. We did a historical look on the economic value of the battery and some discharge prices and things like that. So there was, I think I had it here, 11 to 27% reduction with that size of a battery, and I think they looked at a year and a half or 2 years of historical congestion prices in that area. The second part of the analysis we looked at was the use of the battery to function basically as a STATCOM in the region and what kind of impact it would have for the voltage stability problem that has been known in the area, that we have an outstanding operating guide with MISO on that one, and that also is showing a positive impact to the area if we use it in that regard. Did I answer your question there?
No, my question was, what was your underlying assumption? Was this project in dispute part of your assumption or not?
Lake Wilson, it was generic and already included in the models we receive, we get from MISO, then yes. Otherwise, no. I can double check for you on that one, but I don't think, we were looking at just the battery, the 300 megawatt battery and its reaction. So I can pretty positively say that we did not use the Lake Wilson battery in any regard to how we were looking at the 300 megawatt battery. So we weren't using that as a STATCOM or trying to offset it with that either. So we were just focused on the Noble's battery.
I understand, but not the battery. I think one of your company staff mentioned that I think battery is not the problem. Actually, it's good, but I think solar was the problem. So my question is, was 150 megawatt solar from genetic or specific, was it assumed in your study in the biennial transmission line study?
Mr. Standing.
I can double check for you. I'm not positive on that one, but again, from our analysis standpoint, I don't know if it would matter. We were just looking at the region in general, so it was kind of all the generators in the area if they were on. So, but I can certainly get that answer. I don't know it off the top of my head. I have to go back and look at the model specifically.
Yeah, thank you. At least it's not in the record. I think in this proceeding and this record, I think now I can understand why department was frustrated that they don't have enough information to make a recommendation here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hom. Commissioner Sieben.
Thanks. I just want Excel to more explicitly say or answer why they put Lake Wilson as proposed in their original RFP that the commission approved. If there are now these outstanding problems with curtailment and the location of the project, why did you bring us approval that included Lake Wilson in the RFP?
Ms. Steinhauser.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Sieben, it's a good question, and this process has highlighted kind of a gap in the RFP process that we plan to adjust moving forward, which is applying a congestion analysis earlier in the process so that these kinds of issues will be better addressed or better known or reacted to earlier in that process. And then I would say that this was, as my colleague mentioned, this was a known issue, but it was one that we thought that we could negotiate through during the negotiation process.
Well, that is not, now you're bringing this, so Ms. Steinhauser, from my perspective and read of the record, you're not only putting the commission in a difficult position, but you're potentially leaving ratepayers vulnerable to more costs, because although you say you're fine and you don't need the energy, like, how is this gap going to be filled eventually then? Is it going to come forward in another RFP? The Lake Wilson project, one of the benefits that I saw that I think is still present is it has a GIA and it would be eligible for the existing tax credit. So you bring forward a project later, whether it's self-billed or in another process, how is it going to have those same benefits? And how do you propose for that to not be a cost for your ratepayers to fulfill that hole?
Ms. Steinhauser.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Sieben, I think that preliminarily, we don't view it as a gap. As I mentioned, there are significant resources that we are actively and successfully working on bringing in front of the Commission for approval. And while we recognize that there were some benefits to this project, it reached a point, congestion is like, I think, the primary one that we have a big concern with now, but there are other issues with these negotiations where it was not moving in a direction, unlike the others, where we could say it was in our ratepayers' best interest to do those. And we have other projects where pricing or other terms are beneficial to our customers, and we would like to move forward with those. So we don't see it as a gap. We don't see this as like a resource fill. Like I said, we are very comfortable that we can meet the reliability and resource needs that have been identified. This is just not the way that we would propose to meet them. If the Commission would like us to move forward with Lake Wilson and negotiate further, we can try, but we have hit, with the guidance the Commission gave us, we have hit walls that we have not been able to overcome to respond to the Commission's concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's fair to put the Commission in a position to say, like, if you force us to continue to negotiate, then we will. Like, that's not our role as the PUC. It's your role to bring forward prudent projects that meet the company's needs and then for us to approve them. But again, like, there's no alternative here that I think is going to hit some of the key metrics that you outlined, and, you know, that record still shows, excuse me, that the PVSC number is positive for inclusion of Lake Wilson. So, sorry, I can't talk long or I start to cough. But the question I have too then is, will additional projects, did the trade secret numbers that are in here, I saw the number for the megawatt hour for Lake Wilson compared to other projects. Was that including the cost of the IRA in it?
Ms. Steinhauser.
Do you know overall megawatt hour dollar number?
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Sieben, I would have to see if there's someone else who can answer that question for us.
Yeah, Chair, it does include that IRA benefit goes back to the developer.
So when we see, and I understand you think like there'll be other projects coming forward that will meet further needs, but how is it not going to be significantly higher when other projects are going to come forward that don't have that dramatic IRA tax credit savings? Like, what are we supposed to compare Lake Wilson to out into the future when the tax credits are expiring or they're not going to be able to hit the construction deadline? And so other projects you bring forward are just going to be more expensive going forward. What am I not seeing that you are that doesn't make this really difficult?
My response to that is you're correct. There are benefits, there are tax benefits to these resources, all the resources in front of the Commission. We have to ask ourselves, do those benefits outweigh the cost, right? And I think that's what the challenge is here. There are some additional benefits with this resource, the fact that it is a timely resource, the fact that it does qualify for those benefits, but at what cost to our customers? All the other projects that are in front of the Commission today all have the same benefits, but they don't have that additional cost that this resource does.
Yeah, I understand that, but you should have brought us other projects then, starting with the RFP earlier, if you thought it was going to, more of them were going to fall apart or something. Like, now we're stuck in a position to either say, continue. I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't say, like, continue to negotiate with Lake Wilson, because future projects aren't going to have the benefits of the, up to 40% tax savings. So what do you want us to say? Like, continue to negotiate with Lake Wilson and maybe it will be economic because there's no other project out there or on the horizon that's going to be able to especially hit the tax credit issues, or what?
So I appreciate the thought. I appreciate the concern. Again, I want to emphasize this project has some benefits. It's the challenge is at what cost? All of these projects are going to have some type of a cost and a risk to our ratepayers, to our customers. But this particular project, the additional cost, mostly attributed to where it's located, is significantly more costly to our customers than the other resources that we have in front of the Commission. So although it does have good benefits with the IRA and with tax benefits, I'm not sure that outweighs or offsets the cost to customers.
I understand that it's more expensive looking backwards, and I think what I'm trying to get you to articulate is, how do you know it won't be cheaper than the projects that you work on going forward? Because that tax benefit is so significant. It's clearly more than the delta between the megawatt hour of Lake Wilson and the next cheapest project. So how do you propose to solve that, where future projects are going to be, I would think, just because of the tax value of the IRA, are going to be so much more. Or am I looking at it do you have a secret project like in your pocket that you can pull out that's going to be significantly more cheaper, that's just not included in the RFP here, that will come in front of the commission later to fill the resource gap and will still meet the IRA deadline or not?
My colleagues reminded me, and I think we stated this publicly in our comments, that this is the most expensive resource that we have in front of the commission today. With this petition as well as the other two petitions.
Lake Wilson is the most expensive.
Most expensive to begin with, just as a baseline. And then that you add the congestion on top of that. And that includes all of
Okay, and sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm wondering, if we could hear from Invenergy about what this exchange and what they think.
Yeah, I was going to turn to Invenergy next. Ms. Bjorklund.
Commissioner Sullivan, Chair Steven. Yes, Invenergy and Excel had numerous negotiations, ongoing negotiations between April and December, actually, to resolve the commercial provisions. And given the time invested in the process and the advanced stage in the negotiated agreement, Invenergy actually thought the PPA was inevitable. And so it was surprised when Excel pulled out of the negotiations. And Excel's offer in October seemed to backtrack a little bit. And, it is hard, like you mentioned, to discuss the trade secret, but I want to point out that kind of that provision that was being, regarding curtailment, that was under negotiation. Bringing the issue of congestion into the picture at the 11th hour seems like a red herring. A lot of this information was put into the record in December through an information request. And this was something that Excel was aware of the congestion issues when this process started. Congestion wasn't a criteria in the bidding process. We had a red line PPA when we filed our bid. All these things were known to Excel, and it was selected by Excel and by the commission.
Bjorklund, to follow up, I did look at the trade secret numbers, and your megawatt hour is higher than previous projects. And I think it's weird for you to come in and ask us to order Excel to negotiations. And I'm not really comfortable doing that, but I think you can make a better case, at least in my estimation, or you should try to make a case to the commission that your project would result in a overall economic and prudent investment in Excel ratepayer dollars. And I guess I want you to make that case to us. We have seen the trade secret numbers. We've approved Lake Wilson in different venues here. And so what is your case that on the overall cost issue? Do you think that, we're not involved with your negotiations, but it is higher than some of the other ones that's already been stated, and there has to be some flexibility and possibly a way to save your project where you can continue to get that number down? Is that feasible, or are we just wasting time here by discussing this?
Ms. Bjorklund.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan. Yeah, that's feasible. I mean, these terms were being negotiated. Now, we did not sign Exhibit B to the protective order, so I don't know what the prices were for the other bidders. I have no idea. So I have no idea where we land in terms of the other bidders. But Lake Wilson is the only clean energy project left in this docket that's not just a battery. And I think it really is important about what would replace Lake Wilson. We don't know what that will be. And without getting into the negotiations, there were negotiations on price. We were surprised that they stopped negotiating. The Murray County provided comments about the tax revenue from the solar portion of the from the project as a clean energy project, as a renewable project. I mean, it has a lot of value to ratepayers, and it has qualified for safe harbor to secure those federal tax credits. So as you pointed out, any future project could likely be more expensive, and technology diversity is an important goal, I think, here in this docket, and we're losing that.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I don't know whether you can say, what was your plan to use a tax credit, ITC or PTC, for your solar?
So I'm going to
Ms.
defer.
Bjorklund.
Thank you. Commissioner Hom, Sullivan. I'm going to defer to Greg on those details.
Okay.
The assumption was ITC.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that means this project potentially has risk of losing about 50% of production, because a lot of wind farm behind that substation, some of them is losing about 50% of their production. Curtailment rate is that serious. That's why our commission spent tons of time, and utilities are working on solution, and that's why we have a specific section in the most recent biennial transmission line. I think this curtailment issue shouldn't be red herring. It's a real issue. I don't know whether companies are taking that seriously, because other IPP who has their own generation, not PPA, is losing tons of money due to this congestion. I don't know if companies are willing to take that risk. I cannot tell Excel to sign on to this and making ratepayers to bear that risk, because it's so much.
Commissioner Hom, the congestion, as we know, the congestion is caused by wind near the Noble substation. This is solar plus storage. Have we done modeling to show that the solar doesn't impact the congestion? No, we have not. The information that was brought in to the record was the 11th hour. And Greg, I think, wants to add to this.
Greg. And I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
Your last name, I forgot your last name, sorry.
It's a challenge. Polheber. Greg Polheber.
Mr. Polheber.
You know, I just wanted to go back to a comment that was made that the negotiations resulted with the ratepayers and the company bearing the full risk of curtailment. If you go to the trade secret documentation, there is a section in there where there was offers to share in that risk. So I don't think that's being fully articulated correctly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Polheber.
Just follow up.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. Yeah, but also I don't trust those numbers unless companies are willing to put their money on it. Okay, if you think congestion is not an issue, you can bear 100% of the congestion risk. But if I don't see that in your writing and then taking the financial risk, I cannot trust this hypothetical engineering study number. I think that's my bottom line, that I don't know. I want Excel ratepayers to bear that risk without clear information. I think that's why department was struggling with this docket. But yes, at this point, I think congestion in that area is very serious. We need a clear information to make sure that ratepayers are not bearing any unnecessary risk from any project.
Thank you. Commissioner Tuma.
Dr. Lieb, you support the approval decision option 1 and decision option 2. And the whole purpose that we're here is we had an IRP, okay, that required up to 800 megawatts of firm dispatchable resources, okay? And so I'm looking at decision option 1 and 2, and it's not uncommon that we go over 800 if a project is on par with all the other ones that are in the docket, to say, you know what, we need energy, and we want to have energy, and we also see the horizon of, you know, organic energy growth on top of AIs and that. So I look at your decision and I look at the numbers here, and I could at least say that with decision option 1, XL is meeting the IRP, and it seems like you agree with them meeting the IRP, that they're getting 800 and actually a little bit more than 800 with decision option 1, which of course does not have Lake Whistling in it. That seems to be your position, and then I'll ask you about what we're missing here after that. But I want to be clear. They should be able to get advanced recovery under the statute because they're meeting their IRP obligations with the projects that we're having here, and that's your position.
Dr. Lieb.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Tuma, that's a correct characterization of our position.
When we look at Lake Wilson, your frustration, I'm thinking, is that, yeah, we need more energy, we need more firm capacity. Here's a project that may be included. We just don't have enough information to make an assessment to say, yeah, we're going to put you in with the rest of these folks that are going to get advanced recovery under this IRP and this request for proposal, just because we don't have enough. You recognize there's negotiations going on, but you just don't have enough to say, look, we think Lake Wilson is very compatible as far as numbers and risk for ratepayers as would be Cannon Falls or the other projects that are involved in here. We just don't know whether we want to take that extra risk above the 800 with this project because we just don't have enough information. Does that understand? That's what I at least read, and I'm going to be careful with numbers and who I'm comparing them to. But
Dr. Lieb.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Tuma, I think that's also a reasonable characterization, and the department has struggled with this one partly because of the data gaps, and I think Commissioner Hom raises a good question about additional data and modeling that may be in the biennial transmission reporting and what that may or may not do to the viability of this project. I think we've also not wanted to insert ourselves into negotiations of the PPA between the company and the developer. We suggested that perhaps the ratio of solar and battery is something that should be looked at to determine whether or not, if this was more battery and less solar, would that be a more viable option. But I think that that's a correct characterization, that at this point the department feels that there is significant congestion curtailment risk with the location of this project that was not, given that the resource planning modeling is not locational, it wasn't borne out as clearly when picking the resource originally. And again, from what we understand, which I think there are remaining data gaps on exactly how much congestion, how much curtailment, we do feel that there is risk here. And again, we don't want to insert ourselves in whether or not they should continue to negotiate. That, I think, is between the company and the developer on whether or not they can get to a place where risk is reasonably shared on the curtailment. But from what we understand, we have concerns.
I think that's very critical, and I think Commissioner Seaman touched on it. The commission doesn't want to insert ourselves in negotiations either. And it seems like we're being pushed into that, and it seemed like that was your concern too, is that we're pushed into this negotiations because what we deal with is a RFP the company brings forward that they have developed with a developer, and that's what we make our assessment on. And right now we do not have that, but we do have projects that meet the conditions of our IRP, actually exceed the conditions of our IRP. And so I appreciate wanting to get as much solar onto the system and much batteries, particularly in this area. I appreciate the effort to do that. But at some point, we can't insert ourselves in those negotiations. It's the utility I regulate. It's the utility who has to have a reasonable project in front of us. And you don't have that to assess for me. And I don't have that to assess. Certainly, if they want to continue to negotiate, that's up to them. I don't think I have to tell them to do that. They can negotiate. They can bring us a good proposal at any point. But right now, you don't have anything to assess. I don't have. I could look at the trade secret numbers till I'm blue in the face. I just don't have a record that I can make some sort of determination with Lake Wilson. And I think that's your position.
Dr. Lieb, can I add to that? Commissioner Tuma, there are information requests in the record that I think are getting at the same questions that you were asking. I don't know if the department has been able to review those responses or not, but I'm kind of wondering, is there something beyond those IRs, or what is beyond those IRs that is not answering the department's fundamental concern?
Chair Sullivan, we have reviewed the IRs. The IRs responses at this point, I think it's not a completely knowable. The exact amount of curtailment and congestion impact is not fully knowable.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think my team hasn't looked at what I don't think the impact of that 300 megawatt battery project is fully in what exists right now in the IR responses.
Yep.
But I can say at this point, the department believes, based on the information that's been given in IRs, that the congestion curtailment concerns are real. And I think that was what we were able to get to with the sort of the limited time. The initial question was, is this true? Is the solar really going to be? Is the solar generation really going to be coincident with the wind congestion? What is the risk? And I think the department has determined that the risk is non-trivial, but I don't think we have enough to really. Again, we're not going to insert ourselves into the negotiations, so we're not coming to you with a solution, partly because we don't have enough data, and also because it's not really in our scope to solve this problem. But we can tell you we have concerns.
I appreciate that, and one of the things that I wanted to point out is, like, when projects do get this far down the road, and I mean, the site permit for this project was approved in 2024. There are somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 jobs, I think, that could potentially be associated with it. LIUNA and 49ers, carpenters, they supported it. So, like, we're down the road, but here's my concern. I see, Ms. Bjorklund, I understand you want to make a point, and I'll let you get to it. My concern here is I don't want to get in between the negotiation between you two. That's a level of granularity that I don't think it's appropriate for the commission to dig into. And I have a lot of questions, and I recognize that the answer to those questions puts us in between. And I don't want to be in that spot. And if we order Invenergy to continue to Excel, if we order Excel to continue negotiating with Invenergy, we've in effect inserted ourselves into the negotiation, and that's not appropriate in my mind. Now, so I'm very reticent to go down that road. There are, on the other side of the equation, though, there are real potential benefits here. So I actually like what the department is proposing. I think the department may have kind of brought us a thoughtful solution to dig in. And if you guys want to continue negotiating, that's fine. But I'm still reserving the right in the future to go either way. But I don't know. I don't think the department has the answers. Commissioner Hom, I think the questions that you had before, like artfully brought that out, and what you just said, Dr. Lieb, as well. So I find myself increasingly comfortable with a direction where the department is going to have to do some more review on this. And I think we need to put a timeline on it, though, because it can't be strung out forever. So I don't know. That's more of a statement than a question. Dr. Lieb, if you want to respond to it so I can make it into a question since we're technically still in.
You want a timeline?
Sure. What's a good time?
Let me see if the folks that actually do the work have thoughts.
Dr. Rackow. I like saying it that way. It has an ominous tone to it.
Good afternoon, Steve Alco from the department, and I left my Darth Vader mask at home today. What kind of analysis is the commission looking for that would go a long ways towards how much time it would take?
I think I would turn to Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I think the minimum, I think we need to know clear information or better information by third party, you, department, on this potential congestion risk and curtailment risk.
We can value it economically, but we can't calculate the numbers themselves. That comes out of the transmission models that Mr. Standing and friends run that we don't have.
Yeah, at least if you can compare what assumption was built into the biannual transmission line, this Dover substation study versus what the Invenergy is claiming as a no risk for the congestion in their own study.
We have to send IRs, get the responses. I don't know. I've never looked at those models. I don't know what the inputs even look like and how comparable they are if they're even using the same model. It would be impossible to put a timeline without even knowing if they're even using the same models.
Yeah, and then also another potential risk analysis. I don't know how to put it. I don't know which one is a trade secret or not, but I can say generically in the MISO interconnection agreements, even if you have to agree on interconnection and then initial dollar amount is not a final, I think a generation interconnection customer has an unlimited liability. Means if the MISO and or facility owner find additional fix, they are required to fix it and pay for it. So I hope there is some analysis that what kind of a potential risk that ratepayer has to bear if that happens. Is it possible?
Dr. Rackow.
Commissioners, it depends on the contract and the contract language. You might have, for example, a contract where they get $1 per megawatt hour payment, and it's up to the seller to figure out what that cost is going to be, and it's their trouble. And you might have a contract where there's language on a flow-through on excess transmission costs above a certain number or whatever. It would be up to the negotiations and what actually went into the contract. And of course, we don't have the contract here to know which approach they're taking.
Or you can ask both parties to give you what is their standing position to see how much gap between those two.
Then you're inserting yourself into the negotiations. That's the problem that we're having right here, that I get a little nervous. And I agree with you, Commissioner Hom. These are the questions that need to be answered. But if we start getting to, before there's a contract, before there's some sort of meeting of the minds of what the proposal is in front of us, we're kind of now being this arbitrator of what is the risk for ratepayers for this particular bid versus this particular counteroffer. You know, and that's where I'm struggling with, because I think Dr. Rackow hit it on the head. Until he's got a contract, he really has nothing to analyze. other than two positions.
In that case, why department said that you don't have enough information to make a recommendation on this? Because that's why I'm doing this, because department asked for the data, and now I'm trying to give department data so you can have your own analysis to give us answer. What data you are asking and what kind of recommendation you are looking for based on new data?
At least some of the data we were looking for was locational specific curtailment data. Excel put into the record the Encompass analysis. Encompass does have curtailment in it, but it's not location specific, it's system based. And using that data, we could take the Encompass and make it closer to reality. And that's one reason why we were looking for that curtailment data.
So your statement in your comment when you're asking for more data is about curtailment, nothing else?
That's what I remember. There may have been other things, but that's what comes off.
Yeah, then I can just stick with the curtailment issue, because I agree with you that, yes, we are too close to, we don't want to go.
And curtailment is important there. I mean, we want to know these questions, and that, in a generic sense, might be important. But that's another docket.
Okay. Well, maybe Ms. Bjorklund.
I did want to make sure that this was added into the mix, was that when it became apparent that Excel wanted more battery, we're open to changing the ratio. And that's something the department also just referred to, about perhaps a different ratio. And we're open to that, and we actually provided a written offer to Excel, adding additional storage. And that, of course, would, if there's congestion or whatever that congestion is, would mitigate congestion. So, I mean,
So I
we're working on
totally,
it.
I understand. That's going to get me into a whole bunch of questions that's going to insert me in between your discussions.
Yeah, and
that's what's challenging here, is that my mind can be endlessly curious about what's going on, but I need to, and I think all of us need to protect ourselves and protect the commission from that.
You know, I love negotiations. I'd love to dive right in the middle of it, but I'm not going to. One question real quick to Excel, and that is, you know, I would, if it were me in the world, I would approve your PPAs that are in front of us now in the approval of meeting your firm dispatchable. But I just want to make sure you understand and you would be willing, I guess the question I have, if for some reason you're able to work out solutions with them that are comparable to what's in the bids, would the company be willing to come to us to modify this order or add to this order in a separate filing with regards to IV Energy, so that, and then we'll have an analysis if you do come to a meeting of the minds?
Ms. Steinhauser.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Tuma, absolutely, and I think that's consistent with the original order on this, which was that if certain agreements are ready earlier, that we could bring them in stages. There's also the opportunity, if this doesn't work, like I said, we are aggressively and successfully pursuing resources. As you all know, we need resources, and there are RFPs that the Lake Wilson project could reapply to, so this isn't the end. And there's a lot of concern about the cost here, and I think it's important to broaden our perspective, again, that this is about these agreements. We have 2024 RFPs in front of you. There are 5 solar projects in Minnesota, and they're all cheaper than Lake Wilson. So the concern that this is like we're missing an opportunity here, or that we're leaving a gap, the company is really comfortable that we are pursuing projects that are in the best interest of our customers. And if we can't do that, we're not going to bring it in front of you.
So, question for you, just kind of tracking back to the purpose of the firm dispatchable docket and its origin story. It comes from reusing the interconnection at Sherco, correct? It's basically firming up that extension cord, correct?
Sullivan. I received some head shakes from the back.
Head shakes positive, head shakes negative.
That is not.
I think that's Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Shaw.
Oh, I mean, I don't mean to blow you. I'm not trying to.
No, absolutely, we should bring Mr. Shaw up.
I might have to have Dr. Rocco help me on the origin story because it goes back a ways. Christopher Shaw for Excel. It's actually 2 IRPs ago where there was a need for up to 800 megawatts identified. And so then we initiated this firm dispatchable proceeding. It actually started before we filed the last IRP, and then those proceedings were essentially kind of merged together with the settlement, where we had sort of the order that the commission had is sort of on both of those. So we were looking at this portfolio in the settlement to meet that firm dispatchable need that was sort of confirmed in the most recent IRP, but first identified in the previous IRP. I can let Dr. Rocco correct any of that.
Dr. Racco.
That's fine.
Don't go any further. We're going to start talking about Sherco gas then, and we're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. For the department. Okay, so I think after we had this conversation, I was thinking, do you need this analysis unless they are bringing final PPA? When they bring in PPA, you have to analyze whether the PPA is at the ratepayers' interest or not, right? So if there is no negotiated PPA, do you still need this data?
Dr. Racco.
Commissioners, you're correct. If there's no filing, you don't necessarily need the data. But there was arguments back and forth about maybe the commission does need to get involved, and we wanted to get at least some basic information so we understood what the issues were. What is the right ratio of solar to battery? How much is the curtailment, and so on? That were the issues that we thought the commission may or may not want to get into, and it's become pretty clear nobody wants to go there.
Yeah, based on that understanding, that I think department resource is very scarce, and we need a department resource in many other things. And unless there's a final PPA, I don't see the need for any data or any analysis by department. We don't want to waste the department's resource, knowing that no commissioner wants to get into this negotiation.
I'd love to get into it, but I don't want the commission to set a precedent to get into it. That's the concern.
So,
Commissioner
Sieben.
I just wanted to jump in, and I appreciated the origin story and the recollection. I'd just like to, again, express my irritation with this on behalf of Excel, because I seem to recall both from Excel and at times from the department the vast urgency for the commission to consider this RFP as an overall package to meet our firm dispatchable needs for the state. And so the commission did its best to approve the RFP on the timelines that were, so critical to meeting our reliability needs, and responded to that, increased sense of urgency. And now to have the project that brings a renewable source of firm dispatchable energy onto the company's system now fall apart because you can't continue to negotiate to get to a prudently incurred resource that would, capture the benefits of the changing federal energy tax system. Again, I'm really comfortable moving forward with the way colleagues have outlined, but and maybe because I'm not feeling well, but I just want to express frustration with Excel for not doing better to reach an agreement on this project because the commission and stakeholders have invested, as Commissioner Sullivan said, a lot of time and energy into seeing this project move forward. So again, I agree, we don't need to insert ourselves into the negotiation, but I'm also saying to Excel, like, do better and bring us something that we can all feel good about approving the costs, because that's what we need for ratepayers. The burden is on you, Excel, to get this done, and you know, like the constant, well, this is now a really important docket, and this has to get approved for our reliability needs. For us as a commission and our staff, it's exhausting too. So, again, sorry to be whiny, but I'm just somewhat frustrated that we're put in this position, and want you to continue to negotiate with Invenergy, because I think it's a good project overall, and I also agree that, you know, the cost needs to be appropriate for ratepayers. So keep working on it, please, is my message.
So thank you, Commissioner Sieben. Is Dr. Lieb in the room still, or? Dr. Rackow, I heard what you said, and I think Commissioner Hom, you and I may be, I mean, the department's suggested decision option was decision option number 7. Is the department supportive of that still, or what am I to? Because that's where I was going when Dr. Lieb said she was going to turn to you for a timeline.
I don't think we need the information. That those are the things we asked in the information request responses, the ones that are for the department. The CEOs have one listed as number D and 7.
Well, the tools you need to get that information if you thought it was relevant anyway, so you don't really need to order it, do you? You can.
That's correct. It was a recommendation to the commission. At the same time, we're also filing information requests. So it's somewhat confusing, but we were going about it in 2 different routes.
Okay. The company's not saying, oh, gee, you're not going to get that information to them, are you? You would get that information to them if it is a legitimate request and you're moving towards sort of settlement negotiations.
So, Ms. Steinhauser.
Chair Sullivan, Commissioner Tuma, correct. And I believe we've provided most of it already.
So there is no actual point to, I mean, there's no kind of outlet here for additional time on this.
I can say the department has no need for the information. Okay. There's one Part D the clean energy groups wanted, and they can speak for themselves.
Sure. Ms. Voss, if you want to speak to that.
Sure. What we asked for was what's been talked about today. What are the planned or possible replacement resources, and then how are planned transmission upgrades affecting some of the congestion and curtailment? Based on the discussion here today, I don't think that information is necessarily going to make a difference here. So I don't know that we still need that.
Okay. Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. I have a question for Excel and then for Invenergy. I think my question is, and maybe, I mean, it's already in the record that negotiations from your perspective have fallen apart to the point that you no longer want to continue negotiations. I share Chair Stevens' frustration, especially related to the locational aspect where that could have and should have maybe been foreseen. I also noticed that wasn't the only issue related to the negotiations. There were issues with supply chain. There was an interconnection cost recovery issue. And these are things, that maybe are not deal breakers, but are additional issues on top of the congestion. I mean, from your perspective, whoever would like to answer this from Excel, is there an offer that Invenergy can bring to you to make this project something you'd like to consider or continue to consider? Because, and I'll just note, we don't have to require you to go back and negotiate. That's up to you. You could continue to do that if you wanted and felt it would be productive.
I'll respond to that. And I just want to be careful about characterizing this. I wouldn't necessarily say this is like a breakdown in negotiations. There's been known concerns with this project from day one. We've been at the table with this developer for, I think, a year now. And so there's been ongoing concerns with the project. The developer is aware of the challenges with the location. It's been in development for, I think, close to 10 years and still unable to find an off-taker for the resource because primarily of the location. And again, I'm characterizing based on my understanding. Mm-hmm. I think we need to solve the locational issue. That's the primary issue. And that means that in this circumstance, the volume of curtailment, the volume of congestion that this resource is going to see has to be taken off the table. And what I mean by that is to get us back to the table where we start, mm-hmm. is the developer has to basically take that. It's their resource. It's their location. They chose it. They're well aware of the challenges. We would expect them to take that first to start with. I think the second issue, and I'm not going to go into the long list of issues. The second issue is the supply chain. Supply chain is a challenge. We've put on record that all of the projects we've brought forward over the past year have had problems with supply chains, and everybody's at risk of those supply chains getting interrupted, and there's cost increases and tariffs being imposed. Most of our developers have either locked in a supply chain or at least committed to a supply chain, so that we know that if that developer's supply chain gets interrupted, it potentially might come back to our customers, but we have a control there. We have some certainty that supply chain is locked in, and we have some control so that if there is an additional cost to our customers, it's a reasonable cost. We didn't have that with this project. I think that's one of the reasons it was challenged in the RFP. Some of the project bids failed for that reason. And then I think that was an ongoing concern with the negotiations, is we just couldn't lock in a supply chain. And I fully understand that some developers don't lock in a supply chain, mm-hmm. not until they have a PPA in place. In this case, and I'll give you a little perspective here. The other project that's in front of you right now, they have one supplier, one model, one make. And so we know if that project gets interrupted, if their supply chain gets interrupted, it's very easy for the auditor to look at that record and find out whether or not that tariff actually impacted their supply chain. With this developer, there is no supply chain yet. They listed over a dozen potential suppliers and then left it open that they have the right to change their supplier in the future. And that's fine, they can do that. But then this mechanism that we've tried to put in place where if there is a tariff that's imposed and that tariff cost is going to come back to our customers, well, then we shouldn't bear that. Our customers should not bear that cost then. So that would be another issue that we would want to make sure is off the table before we get back to discussions.
Thank you. I think, this is a challenging time for infrastructure investments. Like I said, you all could continue negotiations, and Ms. Bjorklund, if you've heard these issues, you've heard that these are this is where the decision points were made, and this is why. I agree that we don't want customers to bear the risk of supply chain problems if that can be avoided, and it sounds like it can be because other developers have identified ways to do that. So, the deal. I agree. I don't think we need to tell you to go back to the table because, frankly, I think that undermines the negotiating position of the utility, which will impact ratepayers. So as frustrating as it is, and I agree with that frustration, now you have a clear understanding, we have a better understanding of what the main decision points are, and if you are able to address them, then we hope you do so, or I hope you do so, and I hope you bring that to the company and that we are surprised pleasantly with a Lake Wilson PPA in the future that looks like a benefit to ratepayers. So I guess that's all. I just wanted to get to the bottom of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Partridge. Mr. Polhaber, you have your hand up.
Yeah, excuse me. I just wanted to interject here and make sure this goes on record about the supply chain disruption. I think that the way it's been articulated is that we're somewhat, new to development of renewables, and that's simply not the case. Invenergy has a portfolio approach to procurement and development of projects with, key supply manufacturers. And so for this particular project, yes, at one time we were considering multiple suppliers, but as we progressed with negotiations with Xcel, we did limit it down to 2 potential suppliers on each major piece of equipment. And that actually gives us flexibility to avoid tariffs and to ensure that we have some flexibility in terms of negotiations with those suppliers. So it wasn't a matter of, complete risk pass through to the ratepayers. I think it was, a very reasonable approach by Invenergy not to enter into supply contracts until we actually have confirmation that this PPA was going to be signed by Xcel. I mean, that's pretty standard to wait to purchase equipment until you have a firm commitment from a buyer. So I just wanted to interject there that, from a supply chain perspective, Invenergy is in a very good position to firm up supply for this project. That really should not be an issue killing this project.
Thank you. I was going to ask Xcel a question. Ms. Steinhauser, I mean, quite frankly, I'm kind of, I feel like I'm stuck in dry dock right now. And, so decision option 5, I'm assuming, would the company be willing to move forward with decision option 5? Would the company still opposed to it? I'm sure you're still opposed to it, but I'm trying to see how you feel about decision option 5 after the discussion we've just had.
Commissioner Sullivan, I think both parties have been negotiating in good faith and have not been able to reach the point that we need to reach for everyone to be happy. So we're happy to continue negotiating, but the baseline that Mr. Bornhofen indicated is, I think, where we would need to start. So we're willing to talk to them with the expectation that that's what we're looking for.
And what's the timeline? What would be the timeline on that?
And I'll probably defer to Invenergy to help us out here, but my understanding is that it's a challenge to solve the congestion issue. My understanding is they have to go back and reapply for a new study to change the ratio, to change the solar to battery ratio. And so I think that's going to take some time. And so once that's resolved, then we can come back and look at the project again and start resolving the other matters.
And any other changes to, I mean, I know Invenergy indicated that they would be willing to change the ratio of the battery. I would imagine there would be issues with the site, though. The Commissioner Tuma, right? I mean, it's not like we can just negotiate away these
I'd be a little
site
nervous
permits.
about doing 5. It says grant Invenergy's request. I could see something along the lines, please do a compliance filing within X amount of time to tell us where the negotiations are at. I'm a little concerned that, just listen to the conversation. They're already trying to draw us into the vortex.
You were right.
And I know it's tough to avoid. I'd love to get drawn into the vortex. I love negotiations. That was one of the things I loved as a lobbyist, but that's not my job here. And so I don't know if the company would be open to just doing a compliance filing to let us know how things are going, so that we at least are continuing to watch, because it's a good project and we approved the permit. I mean, from a site perspective, I thought it was a good project when we adopted it. So Ms. Steinhaus, tell me, would you do that, and how much time would you say that we should come and do a check-in?
Happy to do a compliance filing. I think in terms of timing, I don't, maybe within like 30 days, give you an update, because the parties know where they're at. It's either going to move forward or it's not. So I think we can at least give you a preliminary update in 30 days.
Ms. Berkman, 30 days, that make good for you?
I don't have any objection to that, but I would want Greg's input if he might have an objection to a 30-day compliance filing.
Mr. Polheimer.
No objection. Thank you.
It's filing within 30 days of order on the resolution of any negotiations with Lake Wilson, something like that.
Let's take
Can I just
Commissioner
ask a
Sieben.
question?
Yep, Commissioner Sieben.
Thanks. Commissioner Tuma, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the direction this is going. And the idea here, I think, is that in 30 days we'll see where negotiations are for, is it for this project to fit into this RFP, or is it, or Excel, is your intention that you'll continue to work on Lake Wilson and, you know, try to like find a pathway for it in additional avenues that you've explored? I just don't, I'm a little lost on what we're doing. So
That's a good
what
point.
are you thinking there?
It's a good point, Chair Sieben, and my thought would be 30 days, just let us know the negotiations between the parties. You tell me where it plugs in. If it plugs in here, I'm happy. If it plugs in someplace else, I'm happy too. But I'll look to I think it's a good question, but I would be more flexibility, I guess.
Ms. Steinhauser.
Commissioners, I think it would be an update, like if it works here, great. If there's a different proposal, it would be wherever they're at. So it wouldn't be bound by what's happening here. We would give you a Lake Wilson update. Does that make sense?
And then, yes, and in your update, will you also, at that time, if there are modifications that are needed to the site permit, such as that would change the overall size of the battery, outline what those next steps would be to get permit modifications from the commission and MISO and other things as well, just to give us a sense of timing.
And in addition to that, I mean, I suppose my colleagues will say yes or no. I wouldn't mind the CEO's and the department's recommendation in 7C to include that, possible resources being considered to replace the Lake Wilson project. Just taking that 7C and including that. Commissioner Sieben, do you have any concerns with that? Commissioner Sieben, do you have any concerns with what I just said?
Oh, no, I think that's like a separate issue. But I don't have a problem with that.
I would a little bit, because what's it replacing? It's not replacing anything in this situation. We're approving the 800 obligation is met. Now, if they want to add to the 800 down the road, or they want to plug it someplace else, they're not really replacing
It's
anything.
a good point. Yep.
It's just, this project is a good project. Let us know where it's going.
Then we can strike that. So, Ms. Steinhauser.
Just one reflection on the permit updates. That would be, I believe, Lake Wilson. So this would be an Excel compliance filing. So to the extent updates would need to be made to their site permit, that wouldn't be.
I would like to know that. You don't have to give us that. I think you're going to make a compliance filing. I'm going to guess they're going to do a response.
They're going to do their own. Okay. Just making sure that was clear. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need 5 minutes for, Mr. Stolpis, Ms. Kretz, we're good? Okay. Do we have yes, Mr. Graham. Yeah.
We're looking for your magic.
I don't know if we can require them, can we? I think we can suggest. Yeah.
makes sense.
All right. I will make a motion. If people are ready. I'm going to move decision options 1, all parts A through D. Decision option 2, although we did not talk about it, decision option 3, I thought the OAG makes a good recommendation there, and I think it's important that we get a filing to just have an analysis of any cost overruns or if any cost increases that are attributable. So I appreciate the OAG's suggestion and the decision option, and then I will move the new decision option 8. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can just go to a vote. Commissioner Sieben? Question, okay. Is the motion clear? Mr. Stolpus? Mr. Graham? Okay.
I think I don't know. If
Commissioner
you wanna,
Partridge?
Do you want to take a question from Ms. Steinhauser?
Do I want to take a question from Ms. Steinhauser? Sure.
Sorry.
Chair Sullivan, it's on 3 that we didn't discuss. Our understanding is that would force us back to the negotiation table with those developers. If the way we're reading it is it is creating a requirement that we get approval before we apply that measure. If it's keeping you guys updated, happy to do that. But if we need your approval beforehand, then that kind of negates the term.
Ms. Hinderly.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. Our intention is that this is essentially a cost recovery measure, not an actual change to the contract. So Excel could, in the fuel clause adjustment that you're authorizing this to run through, make a filing in that docket saying the new trade measure event was triggered and here's why it's reasonable. And that's the requirement.
So in the same way that if we have an overrun in any approved project, they have to come back to us later for the overrun.
Absolutely. And I just want to be clear, I don't think this is a filing requirement. It doesn't change the fact that Excel needs to show in the FCA every year that it is prudently its costs that it's passing on to ratepayers are prudent. This allows the state agencies to more easily review any triggering of that provision and those cost escalation measures so that we can argue it's not prudent, or we can say, okay, that makes sense, cool. It's a prudency. They have the obligation for prudency whether or not you do number 3. Number 3 just makes our job as state agencies a whole lot easier.
That's the way I read it. It's not approval of the project. You don't go back for pre-approval. It's just approval of your cost recovery. You need to explain these cost increases and that we need to find out if they were reasonable.
I can address that, Commissioner. There is a condition precedent in the contract. The contract requires that we get full approval of the cost as they're stated under the contract today, including any costs that arise out of this mechanism that you're referring to. If we didn't get that approval today, our internal policy is to not move forward with that.
What if
You're just not getting rate recovery for it. At some point, we got to determine if it's reasonable, whatever action you make in the future. That's my understanding from the way I read it, but maybe it could be clearer. I don't know.
I think we can
Reword
reword the first sentence there to say something like, I don't like to do this on the fly, so then everybody gets to see my thinking process, which is messy and
That's trade
not
secrets.
pretty. So I'm going to work with staff really quickly, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. I shouldn't have taken your question.
Because we misunderstood.
All right, we are back. Mr. Graham, if you could put the new language on the screen and we can all take a quick look at that. See one head nod. Ms. Hinderly.
Chair Sullivan, this is fine with us. If Excel's heartburn is about conditioning cost recovery, if that's the concern, I think it could also just be Excel shall file in its, or maybe we could just start with the triggering of a new trade measure event, Excel shall file in its fuel clause filing that it is just and reasonable or something like that. So if the condition is a concern, that's not a concern for us, and we're happy just to have Excel required to make a filing.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Steinhauser.
Chair Sullivan, with that edit, we'd be good with this.
All right. Mr. Graham.
You got all these AI centers we're building you. Be smarter.
Is, just as a question, a new trade measure event, is that like a proper noun? Is it, why is it capitalized? It is now. Is that like a,
They're nodding their heads.
I'm looking to you, my grammarian.
They seem to know what it is.
It appears to be a term of the contract.
Okay, it is, okay. All right. Are we good? Okay. For those of you who were here and had projects approved but didn't get asked any questions, Mr. Savakul, I think you're probably going to be okay with that. With that, we can move to a vote. Commissioner Partridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Hom?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuma?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieben?
Yes.
I also vote yes. All right, we have completed. Glad that we are moving. So with that, I hope everybody has a nice weekend, and we will talk to you all soon. We are adjourned.